This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate what if Naruto awakened the power of one winged angel. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
As the giant shuriken threw itself at Naruto's torso with the intention of killing him, he stared in shock. He gazed into the hateful eyes of his former teacher, Mizuki, who through the shuriken he gave Naruto a sneer and a malicious look. Mizuki had just informed Naruto of his status as a Jinchuriki, and his mind screamed rejections of it as he recalled all the sneers, glares, jeers, and insults directed at his face and back. His eyes grew dull. The shuriken slammed into Naruto's stomach, devastating his wounds and taking his breath away from his lungs as he jerked forward. Regretfully, it buried itself where the Kyuubi no Kitsune seal was imprisoned. Iruka tried to sprint in the direction of the giant shuriken to stop it, but he screamed. However, the shuriken were so far away that his wounds hurt too much. He was horrified to see the shuriken pierce skin and muscle before fully embedding itself in Naruto. He recoiled as Naruto coughed wheezily, dripping blood mixed with bile and salvia down his chin. In his mind, Naruto was curled into a tiny ball, with sewage water sloshing around his body behind a huge gate that could only be closed by an ofuda paper tag. The Kyuubi no Kitsune roared and jeered. When the Kyuubi saw that man's descendant, the one of chaos, it snarled, since even Biju are afraid of people who have the ability to split the world in two. Kyuubi was understandably terrified. Kyuubi snapped at Naruto. "You monster! Descendant of that creature, you who would destroy the world as if it was an insignificant gnat, I would feast on your marrow if not for this damnable seal." Unaware that his words would trigger the thing he feared most, he carried on with his tirade. The Kyuubi roared, "Just die, you mangy cur, and become nothing but a memory." After tensing up at his yell, Naruto turned to face the enormous fox. In the mindscape of a broken child, his words reverberated uncannily. "Watashi wa omwa din wa nara nai sa." I will never be a memory. In some way, Naruto grew taller while seated, reaching a height of 6 feet. His bangs covered his cerulean eyes, and his once spiky hair has grown long and smooth. Long black leather pants and hard black leather boots that hung just below his knees took the place of his orange shorts, which were once pants when he was short but are now shorts when he is tall. His new muscular body was exposed by his bare torso. The fat on his face had melted away, revealing a trim and attractive face. He looked directly into Kyuubi's shocked eyes. He laughed hollowly and said, "You call me a monster, just like the rest, without even knowing me. I expected better from my kin. I will show these people who I really am. I am no monster, and I am just an angel and fallen angel." Before the cage in which he was imprisoned caught fire and the walls surrounding it were covered in lava and flames, he glared at Kyuubi. Naruto stood in the center, glaring at Kyuubi, before he pivoted and departed from his mindscape. Kyuubi began to stare in shock at what it had seen. Then he deadpanned, "Oh shit." When Naruto opened his eyes, he saw Mizuki with his second damnable shuriken standing over Iruka. As he thrust it forward, he noticed the sick smile on Mizuki's face. It didn't connect. The shuriken had been in Naruto's stomach, but he had taken it out and flung it powerfully at Mizuki's exposed back. It bit into his spine's marrow and cartilage, severing bone and sinew. Mizuki passed away. Naruto saw that his mental metamorphosis was complete and stood up after spitting at the corpse. Naruto approached Iruka. When Naruto looked down, he saw that the wound that had been there just 2 minutes before had healed from his stomach. To have survived such a wound and then killed a Chunin-level ninja, Iruka watched in wonder as Naruto approached him. The Chunin instructor was perplexed by the strength and grandeur with which he hurled the shuriken, the same one that was in his stomach. He nearly scowled as he saw Naruto glide toward him. Naruto walked, sprinted, ran, and he even stumbled like a lion stalking a gazelle. He never had the patience or balance to glide like that. Naruto's hands glowed a gentle emerald green as he walked up beside Iruka. Cura. All of the typical shuriken and kunai wounds that Iruka had taken for Naruto had closed with a faint light the color of Naruto's spell with the simple command. Naruto picked up the scroll he had stolen from Sarutobi Hiruzen, the filthy old man who was Sandaime Hokage. After strapping it to his back, he assisted Iruka in standing up. Naruto pivoted and gazed at a tree. "You can come out now, Anbu-san. The fighting is over, no need to be scared," he grumbled. Before Anbu melted off the nearby trees, there was a brief period of silence. They are the village's most effective weapons and silent, lethal assassins. One came forward wearing a filthy white cloak. "Uzumaki-san, what happened here?" In a monotone, he said. Replied Naruto, "Well, you see, a training session got out of hand, and I had to kill Mizuki because he made unwanted gestures to my ass." With a drop of perspiration at his head, Iruka swallowed. When Naruto saw the Anbu stiffen, he let out a sigh. If you ask a stupid question, you'll get a stupid answer. I know Sarutobi is watching on that pervert-aiding tool he has, that crystal orb. Naruto was deadpanned. Iruka was curious about Naruto's new intelligence and behavior. However, anyone, including Sasuke, would be altered by having a shuriken thrust into their intestines. Iruka stopped thinking. Well, perhaps not Sasuke within the Tower of Hokage. Sarutobi scowled as he witnessed Iruka's recovery because he was aware that no one could perform such a healing technique alone. Rather, it required the assistance of over 24 people, a giant seal, and a patient's DNA as a medium. As he watched his foolish Anbu undervalue the boy, he moaned. Naruto called him out on his ball activity, and he blushed. He summoned his closest nin. He said plainly, "Call off the search for the scroll." Happy to be able to go back to his Icha paradise in peace, the nin gave one nod. When one of his nin giggled like a young boy who had just gotten a glimpse of some women's privates, Sarutobi moaned once more. He tried, failed, to hide his blush and stifled his giggle, asking himself, then again, am I any better? In order to ensure that Iruka recovered completely, Naruto watched as the Anbu escorted him to the hospital. A platoon of Anbu, or more precisely, the scroll on his back, was staring at Naruto. That same filthy white-cloaked Anbu said, "Hand over the scroll so we may return it, Uzumaki-san." Naruto's cheeky reply was, "I think I should do it, so I can apologize and explain what happened." The platoon of Anbu tensed to the ANBU's admittedly amusing yells. Naruto raised himself in the air and grinned down at them, saying, "Keep up, if you can." He took off for Konoha. In the distance the Anbu exchanged glances. A woman with long purple hair questioned, "We're going to be demoted, aren't we?" Another woman with shorter purple hair answered, "Yes." The one in the filthy white cloak was muttering something about bananas, blondes, and explosives while face-palming himself. They raced after Naruto following their moment of insanity, which they had earned while in Anbu. Naruto landed in the Hokage's office on the window sill of the Hokage Tower. The old man behind a desk with leaning towers of paperwork on top caught his attention. Naruto said, "Leave us, we have much to discuss, Hiruzen and I," after surveying the office. Hiruzen flinched in silence. Naruto and Hiruzen strolled to their new residence. Learning about his ancestry from Hiruzen, the Kyuubi, and the Shikifuin was a very bittersweet evening. Hiruzen and Naruto entered the affluent area of Konoha, which is close to the shinobi clan neighborhoods. Naruto snorted as he observed the lovely structures constructed for the clans. Hiruzen continued to look at Naruto anxiously, fearing that he would lose it one day and be left to blame alone. Over the beige walls, they reached a tall wall with black seals, a wooden gate with a tiny spike close to the handle's typical location. Naruto pricked his thumb in response to Hiruzen's gesture toward the spike, and he heard a faint hiss as the wound closed. The gates opened to reveal a traditional Japanese garden with pink and white sakura trees and a koi pond. The seals, which had been black, flashed green, blue, and then black again. Naruto nodded stiffly, still annoyed with Hiruzen. "This is the home of Yondaime Hokage, your home?" Hiruzen turned to Naruto. "I know what I did, or rather, what I didn't do, can't be taken back, and for what it is worth I'm sorry, my boy. Probably only came to escape the work he has to do," Naruto said as he watched Hiruzen return to his tower. Hiruzen let out a sneeze. Naruto turned back to the enormous mansion, which was embellished with white and blue accents and was painted a light beige color. It was a hybrid of a traditional Japanese castle and Western homes. As Naruto ascended to the front door, a lot of feelings and ideas were running through his mind, attempting to create order by tumbling, rolling, and swirling around one another, but only succeeding in the opposite way. Naruto recalled his conversation with Hiruzen the seal and the Yondaime. How his father filled his stomach with the dreaded Yukai bloodlust darkened his eyes as he looked at his father. After all, his father had sentenced him to a life of loneliness, a hell without family or friends. Even though the Ichiraku family fed him ramen, he still felt lonely because he couldn't visit them all the time. He was liked by Iruka, but not enough. He only recognized himself in Naruto, as if he could somehow undo all of his childhood actions. He thought savagely, "I will take your techniques, father and mother, and I will make them my own, they will be mine." Then he let his anger out with a sigh. Yes, he detested his father. However, beneath that hatred lay a deep respect. When a mentally tough guy like Naruto doesn't know something like that, it truly makes him wonder if he could do the same in his shoes. Would I have the courage to make that sacrifice for those who showed me kindness? If I ever had loved ones, would I be able to defend and shield them? Naruto was unaware, perhaps because he never truly experienced love or anything deserving of protection. He began to shake his head at the ridiculousness of his life when he became aware that he had ascended to the third floor of his home and was already heading to his new room wearing his new leather pants. Naruto patted the scroll that held his wallet, his Icha, and a few priceless photos of Iruka and the Ichiraku family. What? Of course he likes girls. He's a guy, Sakura is not included. How did he come up with his sexy technique, in your opinion? It was time for bed, Naruto said, shaking his head, eager to put his apprehension to rest. He undressed and put on his father's old sweatpants before going to bed. The following day, with people only rising at the crack of dawn to go about their daily lives, Konohagakaru was a serene place. Naruto is one of these individuals. As the sunlight streamed into his bed from the window, he opened his eyes. His hair had flipped over his shoulder and landed on his stomach. As he sat up, he scratched his chest and gave a jaw-cracking yawn. He crossed his fingers and muttered, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," and, sure enough, 5 clones appeared. The original Naruto said, "You know what to do, Osu." The clones said he would unwind, while the clones, each armed with enough energy to produce 1,000, went to the vault containing his family's techniques. After yawning again, he made his way to the shower. Naruto felt the seals on the walls come to life as he emerged from the shower, wrapped in a towel, alerting him that someone was waiting for him. He shrugged and went to get some clothes from the closet. He retrieved a black trench coat from the closet and put on his black leather pants and boots from the previous day. He scowled. There was a gap. He dismissed it and snatched up an odd belt-like item of clothing that fastened the trench coat to him and wrapped around his abdomen. Feeling the sun on his back and the fresh memories of clones being banished in the vault room, he strode to the gate. When he opened the gate, he saw one Enbu agent and a shinobi standing there. He gave Naruto a single nod and handed him a scroll with the Hokage's seal on it. When it was turned over, he vanished. The scroll read when Naruto opened it, "Greetings, Naruto. My greatest regret is not helping you more, both for the things I should have done and for all the things I did not do. Even though you have money from your parents, I feel compelled to give you this money so that you can purchase your supplies. You will find a small fortune in a Hia aid of Konoha in this scroll, and for what you said about me and my lack of courage in my office, I have rekindled my will of fire. So don't worry, my boy. I'll remind those who would try to harm you and me that I am known as the Kami no Shinobi for a reason. Sarutobi Hiruzen. Love. PS. Visit Higurashi Weaponry. They will not be angry with you for your burden and will give you a discount. The money has the instructions." Naruto stopped and lit up the garden with a smile. Finally, some positive news. Happy that something in his life was going well for once, he said, "Looks like I should go to this shop now. I need to find some materials for sealing and new equipment." To his surprise, he discovered well over 50,000 ryo when he opened the scroll's money. "Yes, I'm choosing the 1 ryo $1 option." Naruto left 5 more clones to go through the house and dispel themselves when they found food or other necessities, as he closed the gate behind him. Even though it was early, at least early for him, many people were awake when Naruto strolled through the streets. It was 8 in the morning. Naruto noticed that some people were staring at him, but they weren't the typical glares. Rather, they became somewhat paler, and the cheeks of some women even became more pigmented. It was amusing. Should I play around with the women a little? Naruto asked himself this question. Even though the idea was amusing, Naruto didn't see the need for women just yet, so he shook his head. Maybe when he was more powerful. The Higurashi weapon store was a few buildings up ahead of him. As he got closer, he noticed a girl sweeping the front of the store with her hair up in 2 buns. She was a Genin Kunoichi because she was wearing a Hia aid. She blushed and stammered as she tried to explain that the store was still closed, but he ignored her and walked past her. He walked inside after opening the door. Every millimeter of the space was lined with rows and rows of equipment, from all kinds of armor to zanbatsu, katana, wakatashi, tanto, naginata, kunai, and shuriken. He noticed that the Konoha symbol was carved into a pair of shoulder guards. He picked it up while looking around for sealing supplies and other items. He grinned. Tenten Higurashi was a serious kunoichi. She didn't worry about her face, hair, or other peculiarities like other girls did. As a result of training with her crazy sensei and her teammates to collaborate, she was extremely skilled at her job. Like any other morning, she got up, helped her father set up the store, and then left for her team practice. She would have left, but since her team had just returned from a C-rank mission, they had the day off to do as they please. Still trying to wake up from her shower, she swiped the front of the store in a daze. Despite her no-nonsense exterior and lack of fangirl tendencies, her heart skipped a beat when she looked up and saw a shadow covering the area she was sweeping. With a little scroll in his hands, a blonde god dressed in black was making his way to the store. He looked majestic with his coat billowing behind him. His hair, which was following him, was the color of spun gold. She nearly passed out as his eyes, which were the color of the bluest skies, met hers. She stumbled to say, "The shop is still closed." When he passed her, she was even more unable to speak through the window. She observed him as he picked up materials and moved around the store. She hurried over to the register. Naruto scanned the area, finding scrolls and books about weapon crafting, weapon maintenance, and other topics, thinking he would need it. He grabbed one of each after getting what he wanted. He headed for the cash register and noticed the same girl sweeping outside. As he approached her, she was blushing a little. He decided to have some fun, grinned at her, and saw her blush a little more. He placed his belongings on the counter and observed her tallying them. With a hint of nervousness, she said, "That would be 10,000 ryo." He gave her a smile and gave her the money, choosing to blush again. "Do you have any nodashi in stock, miss?" he asked, trailing off, as if he wanted to know her name, as she leaned over to get him a scroll to seal the equipment in. He quickly responded, "Tenten." She got up quickly to speak to him. Naruto saw her get to her feet swiftly, causing some objects to jiggle in an exciting way. He gave her another smile. "I'm sure we do somewhere. I think my father had one special one. If you want to see it." He called it Masamune. "Konoha," she said. He called it Masamune. The name echoed in Naruto's mind like a call, and he froze. "Come to me, descendant of my former master, and let's accomplish great things together." As though it could talk in his mind, he could clearly hear it. The anxious expression on Tenten's face made him shake. "If you don't like it, we also have some other special weapons from ages past, a sword made from multiple swords, a strange type of shuriken that returns to its owner after it has been thrown, among many other things," she continued. "Swords within swords. How fantastic." Naruto grinned. "A returning shuriken is like epic squared." "Who is this, Tenten?" a bear-like man inquired. This was Tenten's father, Tatsu Higurashi, a skilled swordsman. She trailed off, surprised that she hadn't asked his name sooner. "This is, she said. Holding out a hand to Tatsu, Naruto replied, "My name is Namikaze Uzumaki." "Naruto, pleasure." Tatsu went a little wide-eyed at Namikaze as they shook hands. Naruto grinned. Tatsu answered modestly, "What can we do for you, Namikaze Dono?" "You can take me to the nodashi called Masamune, and the other artifacts like the returning shuriken and the swords within a sword," Naruto replied. Tatsu nodded despite his slight paleness. After turning around, he escorted Naruto and Tenten, who was intrigued by the new client because, after all, her father hadn't even called the Hokage Dono, to the rear of the shop, past a forge crammed with hammers, files, and other blacksmithing implements. They proceeded to a door that was ofuda sealed. After passing through the forge, the door clicked and swung open as Tatsu tore the ofuda away. Naruto's eyebrows went up at the screen. He thought a little languidly, "I should get one of those to activate at my house anytime I'm near a door." They entered a pitch-black chamber lined with a line of pedestals holding weapons. Tatsu himself made wakizashi and a regular katana that could store chakra and serve as a soldier's pill in an emergency. However, there were weapons at the end that were clearly made by another blacksmith, a renowned blacksmith who lived over 1,000 years ago. One was a long nodashi that pierced the pedestal, and the other was a giant zanbato that appeared to be constructed from various swords and was fastened with multiple latches. Tenten claimed that a huge four-pointed shuriken had been given back to its owner. One was a gigantic spear, and the one beside it seemed to be some kind of odd weapon with a trigger on what might have been the handle. A staff of some kind and a pair of gloves that appeared to have seen a lot of combat followed that odd weapon. Tatsu gulped and said, "These are the weapons that you asked." Naruto grinned. As a boy, he, technically, always dreamed of swinging a huge sword and slicing through buildings and trees. For him, these were therefore a real dream come true. To get a sense of them, he approached them, picked them up one by one, and swung them around. Tatsu went pale. Aside from a few individuals, nobody had been able to pick up the weapons for a brief moment. Tsunade of the Sannin was able to lift the gloves, which is said to have increased her strength to unthinkable proportions. She was unable to wear them after that. As if they had rejected her, she had to compensate for this by creating her legendary Titan's strength technique. For some time, his daughter had been able to wield the shuriken, but, like Tsunade, she had been turned away by it. But the nodashi and the swords within swords, which he had given the name Shodai no Tsurugi, were the ones that frightened him the most. Only Yondaime Hokage and Namikaze Minato had been able to move them both a few inches. His son's ability to move them around as if they were nothing said more about his potential than any other person could. Naruto played with them and then turned around. He smiled and said, "I will take them all." "How much?" he questioned. Tatsu cleared his throat. "You have been the only one that has been able to lift them completely. They're yours. It would be a waste for them to sit here." Naruto grinned. The man was cool enough to get these things for free, so he just said, "I like you, hello." Tatsu chuckled in aim. Somewhere, Pain shuddered, sensing a change in the cosmos. "Are you okay, Pain-sama?" a stunning woman with blue hair inquired. He sounded anxious, which was unusual for him, but he said, "I'm fine." Returning to Konoha, with the Sarutobi scroll, which had been empty, now filled with weapons and equipment, Naruto left the Higurashi store. The shoulder guards with the Konoha symbol engraved on them were now on him. They sat comfortably on his shoulders with the new addition. The odd emptiness from this morning had now subsided. He went to Ichiraku Ramen for a quick breakfast on foot. He saw something while strolling down the street. He felt more unrestrained as he walked. His sense of balance improved, and he thought he could make it to Sanagakeru in one leap. Though being able to fly rendered this claim moot, he also thought he might like the Hokage Tower for the first time in years. He felt good. He hadn't felt this good since he was welcomed into the Ichiraku family and tried ramen for the first time. It made his stomach feel warm and tingly. He enjoyed the sensation. When he got to the stand, the adorable waitress behind the counter, Ayame, was cleaning it. He sat down on his stool and laughed that his legs were no longer hanging off the floor. When Ayame heard the laughter, she looked up to see Naruto looking much better. She was pleased, and more than a little faint. To see him laugh, he smiled and said, "Hey Ayame-chan, can I have a Naruto special please?" Ayame smiled and nodded after saying, "Sure Naruto-kun." Naruto saw her turn and begin to prepare food. He was deceived by his eyes, which followed her voluptuous back. He liked to think of himself as a healthy man, but he would normally have denied being a pervert. The idea of not being a healthy man who was attracted to women made him shudder. A minute later, his food was brought to him. He thanked her and began to eat after waking up from his deep thought. Read about Ayame. His mind returned to his issues as he ate. Primarily his animosity toward his father. He inquired about Sarutobi's definition of monster. When he was younger, a monster is a being that destroys without a thought, that has no soul, no feeling, no mercy, Sarutobi retorted with a sorrowful smile. Then why do the people on the streets sometimes call me that? Naruto had inquired. He had responded with a dejected silence. Yes, he truly despises his father. But was he a monster because of that? Was he the monster the villagers rejected because of his animosity toward his father's decision to seal the beast? Because the Kyuubi would have destroyed Konoha and possibly proceeded to destroy other villages if his father had not sealed it. Was he truly so self-centered as to sentence people to death at the hands of the Kyuubi? Perhaps he didn't know there were two possible answers to the question, yes and no. Indeed, he was self-centered for hoping it would never have been ingrained in him. It had saved countless lives and relieved his burden and sacrifice. And no, he wasn't self-centered. Being a Jinchuriki is a horrible fate that shouldn't be endured by even the most heinous of criminals. Ironically, it is cruel to sacrifice one's humanity for the benefit of another, particularly if, like Naruto, you are powerless to change the situation. Because he respected the fact that his father had made the most difficult choice of his life, he made the decision to not hate him. If he had permitted Naruto to be born rather than having an abortion, he must have loved him by doing this to Naruto. He demonstrated both his courage and his faith in Naruto's ability to bear this weight. "I wish I could hate you, father, but is it possible for me to do so? Would I truly be the hero you wanted me to be?" Tragically, Naruto thought. "That was delicious as always, Ayame-chan. Thank you." He grinned as he finished his meal. With a slight flush, Ayame returned the smile and said, "No problem, Naruto-kun." "Hey Ayame-chan, do you know any place that I can buy flowers?" asked Naruto, having just been inspired. "Do you mind if you tell me why you're getting them?" Ayame scowled. In some way, she was upset at the idea of Naruto purchasing flowers for someone else. "I found out who my parents were last night. They died in the Kyuubi's attack. I want to go to Hero Memorial and, well," Naruto continued sorrowfully. "Oh, I'm sorry Naruto-kun. There's the Yamanaka florist shop. I believe it is owned by the parents of a classmate of yours," Ayame said, her eyes widening before she nodded sorrowfully as well. Naruto once complained about Sakura and Ino fighting over a jerk like Sasuke, which is the only reason she was aware of this. Naruto gave a nod. Naruto placed the money in Ayame's hand and said, "Thank you Ayame-chan. I'm going to go buy some flowers for my mother and father. Thank you for the meal." He walked out of the shop after turning around on the stool. As Naruto left the ramen stand, he gazed up at the sky. Time does fly, he thought humorously as it seemed to be around 10 in the morning. Naruto approached the Yamanaka florist at a leisurely pace. Residents of Yamanaka. Ino Yamanaka had just stepped out of the shower and was using a towel to cover her body while drying her hair. She gave herself a wink while gazing into the mirror, recalling that she had a week until she was assigned to a team. She sighed. She would also have to work at her mother's flower shop for that week. The dull, tiresome work involved made her sigh once more after drying off completely. She put on her light orange underwear, then she put on her trademark purple outfit and covered the rest of her body. Her mother knocked on the door while she was putting on her arm warmers. She said sweetly, "Sweetheart, breakfast is ready." Ino answered, "Be right there, Mom." Ino noticed that her father had invited the fathers of Choji and Shikamaru as she descended the stairs of the house above the florist. In addition, they brought their sons along because the clan heads were former teammates. The Yama Akimi Nara families were very close, so this happened frequently. After giving them all a drowsy greeting, she picked up a plate of food. There was light conversation at the table, mainly about other shinobi who had graduated and team placements. "Ino, could you open the shop please, and man the register? I'll come join you after I've finished doing the chores around the house," said her mother. In response, she said, "Yes Mom." Shikamaru and Choji, who tskeda Mendokuso, and complained about being taken off his plate, respectively, were dragged to assist her. The bell above the door rang as they were finishing up the store's opening and getting everything in order for customers. They saw a completely different Naruto when they turned to face the customer. When Naruto got to the store, he was fortunate to find it open. He approached the door and inhaled deeply, then he let it go and went into the store. As he entered, the bell above the door rang, and to his mild surprise, he saw Choji Akamichi, Shikamaru Nara, and Ino Yamanaka repairing the situation. When they saw him here, they also appeared surprised, in any case, as shocked as a fat, sexy, or lazy ass could be. The idea made him stifle a laugh. They waved back in a daze. As he waved, he strolled around, trying to find a nice flower that he could purchase two of and bring to his parents' grave. Having no floristry experience other than tending to reed, ignoring his lone plant at his former residence, he finally settled for roses. Taking care not to prickle his hands on the thorns, he picked two of the red roses and approached Ino, who was giving him a strange look. As if her entire universe had exploded in her face, Ino gazed at Naruto. It was never intended for Naruto to be tall, attractive, or to wear anything other than orange similar to the universe or pie. This was a constant, just something you could rely on always. Her perception of him had been totally altered by this new Naruto. Everyone can agree that Ino is a self-assured girl. She was therefore accustomed to being correct and in charge. She was somewhat stunned by the incorrectness of her assessment of Naruto, even though her parents had warned her not to judge people based solely on their appearance or social status. She had made the same judgment about Naruto as she had about Sasuke. Handsome had been Sasuke, although Naruto wasn't unattractive. In fact, his whisker marks made him kind of adorable. He wasn't as attractive as Sasuke. Naruto did not come from a strong clan like Sasuke did. Naruto was awkward, but Sasuke was majestic. Could she have been so certain of her feelings and perception of Sasuke if she had misjudged Naruto? She was frightened. With a deeper voice, Naruto asked, "Can I have these two roses please, Ino?" She woke up from her daydreaming and stammered, blushing in shame. Yes sure." He gave her a smile. "What are they for, Naruto?" she asked nonchalantly after adding up the cost of the roses. Naruto scowled, then he said gravely, "They're for the graves of my mother and father." With a startled expression, Ino exclaimed, "I thought you were an orphan." With a head tilt, Naruto said, "I'm human, Ino. I had to come from somewhere. Being an orphan is irrelevant." Ino reddened in shame once more. Naruto chuckled and felt compelled to elaborate before she became upset with him for embarrassing her. "I found out yesterday by the Hokage, so I want to pay my respect." Ino gave a sorrowful nod. She didn't like Naruto, but she also didn't despise him. She decided to help him, saying, "I see, then you can have them for free then. Would you like some company? Me and those two fat asses could come for support." She would have been devastated if she had been an orphan and had just learned who her parents were. Naruto laughed, "Thank you, but no thank you. I'd like to be alone with them for my first visit." Shikamaru and Choji looked at him empathetically as Ino nodded once more. After gathering the two roses, Naruto made his way to the door and left a parting remark, "Thank you, Ino-chan. You offering support means a lot more to me than you think." The two boys shook their heads, and Ino flushed. Shikamaru muttered, "Only Naruto could get away with this crap." Choji replied softly, "Agreed." After closing the door, Naruto went to honor his parents by going to the Hero Memorial Stone. Naruto was standing in front of the Hero Memorial Stone, which had the names of those who had lost their lives while serving Konohagakaru written on its surface. However, he was only interested in two names, Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina. On the steps leading to the enormous stone, he had placed the two roses he had brought from Ino. For more than 30 minutes, he stood contemplating the past and the potential future now that he knew his ancestry. He reasoned, Iwagakaru will undoubtedly send assassins to kill the son of the Kiroi no Senku. With a loud laugh, he muttered, "Let them come." Due to the nightmares that continued to haunt his sleep, Hitaki Kakashi woke up later than usual with a sigh. He composed himself like every other day. He had some people to visit today. His past still haunted him as he walked slowly to the memorial stone. He nearly broke when he saw Naruto as he approached the stone because he looked so much like his late sensei. With hope, he thought, could this? Naruto decided it was time to back off and head home after sensing someone approaching the stone and assuming they would prefer to be left alone. He still needed to practice using the vault room and his new weapons. With his nose deep in Icha paradise, he passed the person who seemed to be a Junin. He wore a mask, his Hia tilted over one eye, and a rather unusual hairstyle. Something about the boy, or man, shouted danger, giving Kakashi the chills as he passed Naruto. He thought anxiously, I hope he doesn't hate Konoha. I haven't been this suspicious of someone since I saw Jiraiya-sama go Senin Modu, Sage Mode. When Naruto reached his house, the gates opened for him on their own. When he saw this, he grinned happily. He thought, I guess I don't need to get that Ofuda seal after all. He went to the vault room. After opening his door, he recalled what he had said to Sarutobi the previous evening as he saw the circular vault room open. Rewind. I don't see a Hokage right now. Instead, I see an elderly man who has grown a spine due to time. Hiruzen, you are a shell of the person you used to be. The Kami no Shinobi. You aren't the man I look up to. Don't speak to me until you are who you truly are. End of flashback. He sighed. Probably not the best thing to say, but he was furious with the man, and he did promise to further display his shinobi side. The idea of people discovering the good old man abruptly tearing them a new hole to breathe through made him laugh a little. He observed his clones looking through books on a wide range of topics, including politics, biology, anatomy, geology, history, and many more. When you have all finished your books, dispel yourselves in groups of threes, he said. Hi, was the answer. Hiraishin was one of the data collections Naruto admired as he strolled along the shelves. He grinned within the Tower of Hokage. I won't fail you this time, Naruto, he thought resolutely. Sarutobi Hiruzen felt good. He was on the path to his former glory and was almost there to getting Naruto to recognize him again. He shivered when he sensed a sudden change in the universe. Realizing the source, he sighed. He located it. Fantastic. Hiruzen palmed his face. This beckoned trouble that only Naruto could encounter. Returning with our superhero. A seal that functioned as an advanced mixture of Shunshin and Kachiyose and that required only enough charca to create a bunshin. Something he could perform a billion times over, made Naruto laugh at how easy the technique was. If he could create the seals on his eyes, he could instantly make them appear wherever his eyes were looking. He gave a louder cackle. The Hiraishin's effect could only be replicated because it was written in the user's blood, making it a blood seal. A disguising seal was also written there, but it was so subtle that most people would have missed it. However, the majority of people weren't Jinchuriki. Even Jiraiya, the Yondaime's sensei, was unaware of this. Although Naruto could theoretically just use the Yondaime's copy of the seal, he believed his own would be superior. He created a clone and instructed it to begin generating concepts for methods and similar tasks. The majority of the history had been about battles in the Shinobi Clan Wars, the Shinobi Great Wars, and the battles of the Samurai of Tetsu. He summoned the clone to brainstorm, and his head ached a little. He sat down and processed the information. The remainder were merely tidbits of knowledge. In order to locate more advanced books on the subjects he had the clone's knowledge of, he would have to redo them. After a hand seal, the clones were swapped out and sent off to complete their assignments. Naruto sighed, forgetting to buy groceries, and his stomach growled. Great, just the thing I need, he said. It's better than nothing, I guess. He recalled an apple tree at the back of the mansion that served as a training ground for him. His clone had read a book about taijutsu, with the author's initials being J.L.1, and it talked about water and some other combat philosophy, such as how to never be predictable, to be shapeless, and to be formless. He thought that if his taijutsu could be like that, where he reacted depending on the attack of the enemy, he could adjust when appropriate. He had eaten 5 apples before he considered trying out his new weapons. He opened Shodai no Tsurugi and began weaving it around, trying to find the attack pattern that felt most comfortable. The more he considered it, the more he considered using clones, which would double the effectiveness of the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu's learning capability by allowing the clones to see their own weaknesses as they battled one another. While considering a Kenjutsu style, he came across a quote in a history book that described a battle involving a legendary warrior. Your first strike should be your last. This quote pleased him. To be able to do this, he would need to improve his strength, speed, and accuracy. He created more clones to practice his decision. In order to pull it off, he made the decision to first engage in rigorous physical training. Within the Tower of Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen scowled. It's time to stop this tomfoolery. He was annoyed that the council had to hire someone to come get him, as though he were just another citizen. "All right, you want to see me?" Hiruzen smirked viciously and said, "but you will find the Kami no Shinobi instead of the old man you once pushed around." The guards from Anbu shuddered in terror. With his back straight, his chin up and proud, and his eyes cold, Hiruzen marched down the hall. His secretary, a pretty woman in her 20s, almost urinated when she saw him leave his office with his guards by his side. Not that the village's strongest ninja needed guards. He shook his head as he approached the council room, anticipating a shitstorm from the council, but they would follow his instructions or some council members would be involved in mishaps involving a rusty kunai, ducted tape, and bananas. The council seemed shocked by his gesture, and Danzo went pale when he saw the expression in his former rival's eyes. He kicked the door open, and the doors banged loudly as they struck the walls. Crap, he thought. Hiruzen sat proudly upright in his usual chair, which was sinfully comfortable. He would enjoy playing with them because he was so intelligent that he could outsmart even Shikaku Nara. Speaking of Shikaku, the expression in Hiruzen's eyes had awakened him from his trance on the table. Fearfully, he said, "Crap, he's angry." Hiruzen grinned. "This is strange, and coming from a guy who has a biju in his stomach." Naruto scowled. Naruto's thoughts are caused by the hole he just punched in the tree. Konoha trees are renowned for being stronger than any other tree in the world, with strength comparable to alloy steel. He wondered, has my body changed so much that I can punch through fire country trees? What about his speed if his strength and balance had improved? In a traditional running start position, Naruto said, "San, ni, ichi, ikuzo," he yelled. A blonde comet roared past the clones, startling them. With his feet barely touching the ground before they propelled him to great speeds, Naruto sprang into action, his eyes catching every detail as he rocketed past the trees in his mansion's training ground. He slowed to a stop and noticed that he had crossed the training ground a few times, and he grinned, as if he didn't need to train himself as much as he had anticipated. With a laugh, he called forth Masamune and took a position beside his Kenjutsu Kage Bunshin. He said plainly, "Let's play." They rushed forward, the clones. In the room of the council, "As a result, I have made the decision to dissolve the council for these reasons," an elderly man stated. After a brief period of silence, the room erupted into a shitstorm, with bellows and yells about ducted tape, unfairness, monkeys, demons, and bananas. Hiruzen whispered, "Enough, be silent." There was an audible click as the jaws of the councilmen and women snapped shut. Since the Kyuubi attack, this council has made no contributions whatsoever, no new laws, no treaties, nothing. Rather, the majority of the council appears to be preoccupied with unimportant matters, such as discrimination against Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto and one Uchiha Sasuke, he added. The shit had hit the fan, and the council watched in horror as they heard Naruto's full name. "I will not put up with a body of authority that spends its time sending assassins one after another while bribing its way into a single boy's favor." Finally letting his temper run its course, he roared. A few council members went pale. A few shinobi heads grinned at their situation. Sarutobi was one of them. From now on, the Council of Konoha will no longer exist, and the Hokage will regain all of the wealth, authority, and power that came with the job. This takes effect right now. Therefore, I will serve as the judge, jury, and executor in a treason trial for anyone who attempts to use one of the aforementioned gifts. As he made his way back to his office, he said, "Get the fuck out of my tower and never come back." The heads of shinobi clans were celebrating because they were free of the tedious tasks that the civilian council, which admittedly had idiots as its leaders, had decided were important. They crushed the council. After grinning, Sarutobi whistled a cheerful melody. What a fantastic day. As his guard followed him, he thought to himself. The guards in question started to perspire, returning to Naruto. As his 10th round of Battle Royale Kage Bunshin style came to an end, Naruto gasped. His Kenjutsu and Taijutsu techniques had advanced to the point where he was almost at mastery because he had regained the memories of the clones working in tandem with his own remarkable learning curve. Red. Straight line. He was already proficient in Shodai no Tsurugi, so he could disassemble the sword with ease. The Masamune was more challenging because of its absurd length, which required him to use an unconventional handling technique. He chose to focus on those two weapons for the time being and save the others for a rainy day. When he was able to breathe again, he took out a copy of the Forbidden Scroll and grinned. His cunning mind had come through for him again, and he had been able to use one of the spells, Cura, that were contained in the Forbidden Scroll to heal Uruga's wounds. He sighed as he felt the memories of clones scattering all around him, as well as the 1,000 clones dispelling in the vault room studying Fuinjutsu, but when he attempted to use fire or lightning, it exploded in his face, explaining the craters that lined the area where he learned of his Jinchuriki status. Since he had the most intricate seal ever created on his stomach, it would be wise for him to master the technique. If he could improve its security or even change it to give Kyuubi total control, that would be even better. One of his biggest issues was Kyuubi, who was a malicious chakra construct with a conscience as a result. He had no body. In fact, he couldn't even be called a he. If he could control the fox, he would force it into a human body. A female human body, no doubt, which would be degrading to it. He laughed at the idea. Seeing that it was 3 in the afternoon, he made the decision to stop for the time being. He was quite hungry, so he cleaned up, changed into identical clothes, the pleasures of having an army of clones at your disposal, and headed to Ichiraku Ramen. He walked slowly while reviewing the new sealing techniques he had learned, which were pretty cool techniques. The exploding seal, while available at stores, was sorely lacking in the exploding area. Naruto had a plan to improve the exploding seal, but it was still in the planning stages. Ayame grinned at him, turned around, and began cooking after he sat down at his stool and ordered some Naruto specials. He began to fantasize about Ayame as before, reprimanding himself that since he was a healthy man, he didn't need to be caught off guard or struck by irate women. Unfortunately, it was for nothing. As his eyes once again betrayed him, Ayame turned around with his food and saw Naruto staring at her in a different way than before, as if he had finally noticed her. His smoldering eyes made her flush. A blushing Ayame was staring at him when he snapped to attention and noticed the bowls in front of him. He grinned at her and muttered a soft, "Thank you." Though she continued to stare at him, she answered breathlessly, "No problem." Naruto dismissed it and carried on with his meal. As he worked, he considered ways to improve the Hiraishin. He discovered that the projection seal could project an image of something, such as a kunai, and that it would appear to be made of light. You could move your hand through it and it would reform afterwards. If he altered the projection seal's sealing matrix, which would project chakra to carve, and the chakra's matter converter to make it a DNA copy of his blood, he might be able to make it project a very faint carving of the Hiraishin seal on any surface, writ in his blood. He could take a disguising seal and combine it with the matrix sequence to make it less noticeable, but he would have to figure out how to wear it on his eyes, possibly with glasses, but if they saw the seal on the lenses, they would be able to figure out the game. Perhaps he could go back to where he had first met the fox and take charge of his biology from within. If he could directly access it and force his blood in his eyeballs to form the seal required in his pupil. He smiled as he took another bite of noodles. Since Ayame felt more at ease staring at him and dozing off, he finished his ramen and left the cash on the counter. "It's time to visit an elderly man." A Junin, smoking a cigarette, muttered, "I heard about the council, such a shame." He had a piece of cloth hanging from his side that had the kanji for fire on it, but the idea was quickly shattered by the glare of a stunning brunette wearing an odd dress of bandages. The brunette's glare changed to that of the silver-haired Junin who giggled at his little orange book, and they were interrupted by a shout, "Yosh!" In actuality, Asuma-san is the most unyoutful, someone in green said. Sarutobi palmed his face. "I should have done it a long time ago." Again, who would watch the watchers while they watched for enemies? He uttered those words. They nodded, removing all traces of their antics, including their cigarettes, books, glares, and youthfulness. They heard a quarrel outside as Sarutobi was about to continue talking about the teams they would receive. "You are not allowed inside because Hokage-sama is busy," it was a shout from his secretary. "Are you certain you can prevent me from seeing the elderly man?" was the other person's query. His response was silence. The other said smugly, "That's what I thought." After a loud slap, a yelp, and a chuckle, the door opened to reveal Naruto Namikaze. Sarutobi turned to face his secretary, who was blushing and holding her cheek. Furthermore, it wasn't her cheek. He turned red. Naruto told Sarutobi, "We need to talk at my house." "I'm kind of busy with these Junin, Naruto-kun," he responded. Naruto smirked and declared, "I've discovered a method to enhance the Hiraishin." The office fell into stunned silence. "Naruto, I really want to believe you, but it's impossible to get that good at Fuinjutsu that quickly," Sarutobi replied. "Old man, that's how awesome Kage Bunshin is." Naruto suggested that you use it to solve your paperwork issues. Sarutobi gaped foolishly. He was not alone, of course. The stunning brunette blushed slightly but continued to gape as Naruto approached her and closed her mouth. He wasn't sure if he could keep his mouth shut if he saw it open. The person wearing the fire daimyo's cloth muttered, "To have that much chakra is astounding." "Yes, I do. In any case, this is my suggestion," Naruto stated. The Sandaime Hokage was the only one who listened as he started to explain his idea to the Hokage and, indirectly, the Junin. "Hiraishin is such a powerful technique already, but to be improved," Sarutobi said, sitting there in a daze. But I want a seal master to check my idea for flaws and determine whether it has any merit, Naruto concluded. I don't want to test the concept and then use the technique only to end up without my right arm. Sarutobi nodded. From a shinobi perspective, having another Kuroi no Senku in Konoha would be beneficial, and despite his affection for the boy, it would be detrimental if Naruto hurt himself while conducting his experiments. If he becomes as feared as his father, Konoha would be even better protected. Sarutobi said, I will call for Jiraiya. Naruto nodded, and Sarutobi was the only one who noticed the slight flush on his face because he was only looking at the Hokage. Sarutobi let out a fit of laughter. Naruto gave a headshake. Whatever change I went through that night seems to have superpowered my body to unnatural highs, Naruto said. Clearing his throat, I was able to punch a hole through a fire country tree during my previous training. I haven't used my flight abilities to train effectively in the air yet, he added. Sarutobi nodded. Punching through fire country trees was a natural move for Kage and his chosen Anbu, but not for a supposedly genin who was dead last in his class. Naruto's words caused Sarutobi to tense his fingers. Well, that's pretty interesting. I can't put you on a team right now because a team needs to be roughly on the same level in order to function. However, you would be so far ahead that the team would be the only thing holding you back. Sarutobi had a few options. He could turn Naruto into a Chunin, which would be equivalent to Junin but would have more menial responsibilities around Konoha. Or he could turn him into a Junin, free of the team but eventually forced to lead his own when the time came. Well, we'll test you, Naruto, to see where you would be best fitted. It is pretty obvious that you in a genin team would be bad, Sarutobi said. Since your level is far above theirs, you would only be held back and your team would be unable to work effectively with you. Let's head to the training group. Naruto interrupted Sarutobi, clearing his throat once more. We can use my training grounds, Hokage-sama, he replied. Sarutobi nodded. If he were the son of the Kiroi no Senku, he would also be proud to display his new heritage. At the mansion of Namikaze, the gates opened for him again on their own initiative, and the Junin who was following gasped at the thought of Naruto residing here. Naruto led the way back to his house, happy to have someone confirm his idea for the Hiraishin. They heard explosions, shouts, and the dispelling of countless puffs of clones. Naruto grimaced at the memories of each and every clone. Lightning passing through your torso is not a pleasant memory. If he had experienced that in real life, he would have pushed Masamune in an unpleasant, or pleasant, depending on the person's preference, direction. At the complex of Uchiha, a mentally ill Sasuke Uchiha chanted, "Must kill Itachi, must kill Itachi." The cosmos changed. It is imperative that he not urinate on Naruto, he thought anxiously. Karma isn't always a bitch. Occasionally returning to Namikaze Mansion. When they got to the training grounds, they saw that Minato had already put in seals to fix many of the craters from his first training session. Sarutobi looked at Naruto, but he simply shook his head as he dispelled the clones and stumbled at the memories. To put it mildly, one of the clones' memories is astounding. Through the combination of basic Fuin and Genjutsu, the clones created a kind of dimension pocket that Naruto could control, affecting everything from the color of the grass to time itself. Naruto grinned. Naruto revealed what he had created to the others, who, like the Anbu who were attempting to hide while defending the Hokage, were baffled by the notion. You can't hide from a kid who can paint the Hokage monument in the middle of the day while wearing orange and get away with it. Unfortunately, they were unaware of this. As Naruto gazed at the training ground's immaculate appearance, he said, "Call down your guards if you want Hiruzen, they're welcome here." The clan heads, their new role of guarding the Hokage, were the 6 nin that surrounded him. They probably wouldn't be a good shinobi if they complained about their superiors' orders, so Naruto laughed and wondered if they were offended at having to move from their asses. In his mind, he gave each of them a name. Aburame Shibi, Yamanaka Inoichi, Inazuka Sume, Hyuga Hiyashi, and Nara Shikaku. They nodded in response to his one nod. Who am I going up against, Hiruzen? Naruto inquired. After a brief pause, Sarutobi responded, "You will be facing Maeda Gai and Hitaki Kakashi." Naruto smiled. Post some ideas for the harem and a reason for it. Keep in mind that some girls will already be in the harem. I'm considering crossing over another story with this one, and I'll be a surprise. Enjoy. Masamune had been freed from the seal on his wrist by Naruto, and he was prepared in front of the 2 Junin, one of whom was in the classic Goken stance and the other with his Sharingan out and prepared to kick ass. Unfortunately for them, the hero in this situation was their opponent. Hiruzen, who was standing off to the side, said, "Hajime." Gai and Kakashi, the 2 nin, charged ahead. Kakashi produced a kunai, but given the Masamune's size, he might as well have produced a toothpick. Gai lunged forward, spinning with his torso and flinging out his leg. and Naruto jerked back to dodge the kick while deflecting Kakashi's initial stab with the kunai. Both nin looked amazed at Naruto's strength. It's incredible that he was able to lift Guy, who was wearing weights, before throwing them back to where they had been. Naruto made the decision to stop playing and charge, slicing through trees with his enormous sword, tearing up the landscape. The two escaping nin were devastated when they saw him slash through a tree, ending any hope that the sword would stop if he struck something. From the Kaden Karyu Enden to the horde of shuriken approaching him from Kakashi and Guy, respectively, Naruto cut and diced his way through whatever was in front of him. Kakashi and Guy were in a panic because, although they could have easily kept up with him, the sword gave him the advantage, and they dared not use their more destructive techniques, such as the 8 gates and Kakashi's Reikiri. The flaming dragon was split down the middle, and the shuriken were cut into tiny shrapnel. It was quite frightening to watch Kakashi and Guy maneuver around the enormous Nodashi, ducking, running, spinning, jumping, dodging, and parrying to avoid looking like Swiss cheese. When they got home, their opponent appeared to be very skilled with his Nodashi, as evidenced by his wild, unpredictable footing and attacks that looked graceful and powerful. They eventually ran out of places to flee, so they faced Naruto prepared to play harder. Naruto was no exception. Guy erupted into a flurry of kicks and punches, while Kakashi used chakra strings to control them and unleashed hell with precise techniques like Kaden Housenka no Jutsu. Guy was fortunate enough to be distracted by the fireballs and land an uppercut to Naruto's chin before deciding to use the initial lotus. Naruto's eyes saw everything, and his body moved around them. He dodged a punch to the stomach, parried a foot to the face, and sliced apart small fireballs that were headed his way. He came up behind Naruto, wrapped him in whatever bandages he had on hand, and began to spin as he made his way to the ground. Unfortunately for him, he failed to notice Naruto's cunning grin. The deadly technique's impact caused the training ground to explode. "I apologize, Naruto-kun, but defeating me will require much more than your enormous sword," Guy said. "You're right, Kakashi." Turning around, he saw the sword mentioned earlier at his throat and yelled. He saw a knocked-out Kakashi in the clearing dust of the hole he had made with what he believed to be Naruto. "Kawarimi is taught at the academy for a reason. Its usefulness has no bounds," Naruto replied. He concluded cheekily, "And I think I took you on with my massive sword easily enough, Guy-san." The wordplay caused Sume and Kurenai, the current females, to flush. Sarutobi was impressed because not everyone recognized Kawarimi's value in combat as easily as Naruto did. If all of his shinobi appreciated the technique as much as he and Naruto did, Konoha shinobi's death toll would be halved. Sarutobi said, "Winner, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto." Choosing to be even cheekier, Naruto made a ridiculously flamboyant bow. The nin gathered laughed. They were preparing lunch for everyone, and Naruto tensed at the thought of the clones he had created to go get groceries. Observing him tense, Sarutobi concluded that he had additional clones lying around, dispelling themselves. "You are hereby promoted to Junin. Congratulations, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto," Sarutobi replied. Grinning, Naruto said, "Thanks, Gigi." Hiruzen returned the smile. Naruto walked back into his house, paused, and then used 2 Kage Bunshin to throw Kakashi onto a chair somewhere. "If anyone is hungry, my clones are making lunch. You're welcome to come inside." With the exception of Hyuga Hiyashi, who had to go back to his clan compound close to the mansion, he observed the majority of them entering to eat. They entered the spacious kitchen, which doubled as an eating area. The kitchen was large and square, and clones were already preparing one of the vault room's more recent recipes. It turned out that his mother enjoyed a variety of things, and that cooking and music were some of the ways she dealt with shinobi life. "Lunch will be ready soon. Have a seat at the table," Naruto said, grinning as he noticed that they were preparing butter chicken with rice, a very tasty dish. He then washed his hands before assisting the clones. With the exception of Kakashi, who was cast into a corner where he could recover in peace, everyone sat down at the table and began discussing the battle they had just witnessed. Junin, a significant step toward becoming Hokage and repairing Konoha to a place where a fallen angel can feel welcome and where outcasts are accepted. While cooking, Naruto grinned. After completing his cooking, Naruto made his way to the table to serve the food to everyone. "Eat up, let me know if it's any good," he replied. They were apprehensive when they first tasted the orange dish, but they liked it right away with the exception of Kakashi, who remained unconscious. He scowled as the conversation turned to the battle. The two were frighteningly fast, and he was unable to catch them. He would either have to start practicing the Hiraishin technique seriously or come up with a method that would enable him to obtain them from a distance. When combined, both appeared to be beneficial. He grinned. He pondered whether he could use his sword to shoot a projectile. He blamed manga, Even though the idea sounded absurd, it would be a great ace in the hole if he could throw a crescent of chakra, or even elemental chakra. He began to write after he took a pen and pad from somewhere. Sume was drawn to this and inquired, "What are you doing, Naruto-san?" His straightforward response was, "I'm making a technique." He responded by looking down at the pad and writing frantically without even looking up. At the other end of the table, Sarutobi inquired, "What's it called?" He replied, "I call it Koku Yeba Tansen. Using elemental chakra, I focus it into Masamune, and then unleash it in mass. Thus, it acts as if my sword had gone longer. It appears to be a giant crescent of chakra that cuts through anything. Flying sword edge seems fitting." The talent displayed by this extremely talented boy made everyone perspire. In a shadowy cavern beneath the ground, a statue silhouette was surrounded by 9 dark-clad individuals. One with metallic purple eyes with ripples around the pupils asked, "How's everyone's progress with their assigned tasks?" One stooped man with dreadlocks said, "As good as any would hope when going against Jinchuriki." The purple-eyed silhouette commanded, "We are behind schedule. Fix it." The only one we have captured so far are the Sanbi, Shichibi, and the Yanbi. They all nodded before vanishing. The purple-eyed one, that is beside him, a man wearing an orange mask in the shape of a swirl, materialized. The Rakudo Sennin's chosen one apologized, saying, "Madara-sama, I'm sorry for the delay in plans, but some of the more erratic members of Akatsuki aren't reliable as I would like." Madara gave one nod. "You have to develop further. Namikaze Dono, the universe has been racing toward this encounter for ages, so I'm afraid of the day he shows up because he is the one you have to meet desperately." He thought, "I will give you the Gedo Mazo, the only thing I can give you, and you will gain something not even I could imagine. Time is limited enough as it is, so the idiots should hurry." There was a reason for everything. As the Hokage and company departed his mansion, Naruto inhaled deeply. Now was the moment to face his family scrolls. He had postponed it because he was still somewhat tormented by his resentment of both his mother and father. His illogical animosity toward his mother stemmed primarily from hurt, but speaking with Sandaime gave him support. Rewind. "Indeed, it is perfectly reasonable for you to feel hatred towards your parents, but I know that deep down you are only hurt about being left alone. I know deep down that you love them. Don't let your hurt get the better of you," Hiruzen told Naruto. All Naruto could do was bow his head thoughtfully. Hiruzen let out a sigh. End of flashback. After shutting the gate that led to his mansion, Naruto walked slowly back to the front door. His mind flashed back to the clones dispelling themselves. They read works of literature by some of the brightest minds, including Sun Tzu's The Art of War, and poems by some of the most imaginative people. However, one book in particular, Loveless, kept his interest. In order to practice the Koku Yeba Taisen, Naruto created more clones to replace the ones that were lost. He wanted to perfect the technique so that he could launch it from a kunai. He went through the mansion's main hall before making his way to the spiral staircase that leads to every floor. As he descended the stairs, Minato's illuminating seals gradually took the place of the sun's light. He continued walking until he reached a corridor and then a thick steel vault door with a seal covering it and chakra reinforcement. When Naruto touched the door, the seals illuminated, recognizing him as either Uzumaki or Namikaze. After a single, intense green flash, the seals turned black with a hiss and steam. The door slid open, revealing the enormous library vault. The majority of the clones had vanished, but some were reading a wealth of information, and one was even using a tactic game to compete with another. After Naruto led the other clones he had created into the room, they went back to reading their books, series, and scrolls. He made his way to the back of the vault, walking through the rows of paper. He discovered a set of stairs that led to a shrine. They were only about 6 feet high. Even though there weren't many stairs, he felt as though his entire world was resting on them. This was his heritage, his legacy. There were 2 pedestals inside the tiny shrine. They had scrolls on them, the Namikaze scroll on the left and Uzumaki, the one on the right. He grabbed the scroll on the right. His hands were shaking as he opened it. "Greetings, son. Konoha had heard that the Kyuubi was coming toward us, so I wrote this in case I couldn't tell you myself because I'm afraid I might die soon. Although I lack your father's notable methods, I do possess the scrolls of our ancestors. No one has yet to be worthy of opening them, but I have a suspicion that you will be the one. It was rumored among our clan that the scrolls held the secrets of the gods, but I can't tell you what's in them. Suiden and Hijutsu make up the majority of our clan's techniques. They are strong and should be used carefully. I have sealed the Uzumaki summoning contract among the scrolls for you for more than a century. No one has survived the ordeal of summoning the boss. I know, we have a lot of powerful techniques in our clan. Because the contract is with mythical creatures like dragons and phoenixes. My son, know that you are loved, that I will always be proud of you, and that I will miss you. Uzumaki Kushina, Love PS my diary and other personal belongings are also included in another scroll in order for you to understand who I was in my dreams. On the scroll, a tear fell. Naruto dabbed at his tears at the end. He grinned. He reasoned, at least you didn't leave me, he said cunningly. Now let's have a look at these techniques. Kage Bunshin were everywhere in the vicinity within the Tower of Hokage. As he read the most recent report from Jiraiya, his student, Hiruzen scowled. Orochimaru, his deceased pupil, intends to kill him during the upcoming Chunin exams. Hiruzen, lost in thought, rubbed his bear with full knowledge of the route Anbu sent to guard him. He muttered aloud, "It is time I put an end to that treacherous student of mine. He won't make it out of Konoha alive. And then, I will destroy anyone who is in league with him, for even though Orochimaru is a former Konoha resident, even he cannot hope to infiltrate Konoha by himself. He has a mole in Konoha," he continued to muffle. To alert their master, the root Anbu took action. Hiruzen grinned. They were duped. He called forth his favorite messenger, Sarumaru, and executed the Kachiyose no Jutsu. He addressed the small brown monkey, saying, "Get me Kakashi, Guy, Anko, Kurenai, Asuma, and Naruto. We have a pest to get rid of." After giving a single nod, the monkey divided into 6 identical versions and hurried away to retrieve the Junin. Hiruzen let out a sigh. Another issue that he ought to have resolved long ago. They all emerged from the shadows when he signaled to his Anbu. Their skills were needed by their Hokage. Alongside Kakashi. At the local bar, Kakashi was seated and attempting to block out Guy's shouts as he attempted to challenge Kakashi to a drinking contest. Anko was with them. Stuffing her face with dango and laughing at Guy. Kurenai was drinking sake from her cup and making a face palm at Anko's manners. Asuma was attempting to persuade one of them to play shogi while smoking. A bunch of young monkeys clattered on top of the table they were sitting at, breaking up the chaos. Hiruzen Dono wishes to see you all. He did not look happy, one sighed. After exchanging glances, they all vanished with Shunshin. Indeed, even Kakashi alongside Naruto. Naruto was reading Loveless in the rear of his mansion. In any case, it was quite good by his standards. He knew he had a guest when the mansion's seals illuminated. He closed the book with a snap and proceeded to the gate. The gate opened with a hand gesture, revealing a monkey. He squeaked, "Hiruzen Dono wants to see you, Naruto-san." Naruto gave a nod. Since he already had everything he needed with him, including his reading material and Masamune, he shut the gate and sealed it. The monkey returned to his domain after dispelling itself. Before he leapt to the sky, Naruto knelt, chakra circling his legs. In a matter of minutes, he landed on top of the Hokage Tower. After flying faster than most ninja can run, he leapt from the tower's side, turned around, and seized the window sill. When he got to the floor where Hiruzen's office was, pulling himself in, he looked into Hiruzen's gloomy face. Naruto assumed that something serious was happening, so he nodded once. He pulled out Loveless, sat on the window sill, and started reading. The remaining nin, in the form of Shunshin, appeared not a single paragraph later. Naruto closed his book with a snap. Hiruzen turned to face the individuals he had called forth to the gathered Junin. From the clan heads he chose to be especially direct. "I called you here to assassinate Danzo," he replied. Only Anko and Naruto let their faces display the gloomy smiles. "I will be going along with you. I will be the one to personally kill him. Your mission is to kill any root that you see, Naruto. You will stick with me. The rest will seek and destroy," he said. All Naruto did was his absurd bow. The sight caused the other shinobi to suppress their laughter. "Not that I doubt you, Hokage-sama, but why is a genin here?" asked Anko. Calmly, he answered, "Naruto-kun is a Junin, Anko-chan." Naruto's name had just been added to the Junin roster by him, therefore, it was acceptable for her to be unaware of his promotion. With a look of shock on her face, Anko retreated. Naruto merely chuckled. He noticed that it was almost 5 o'clock when he looked out. He chuckled once more. Standing, Hiruzen tore off his ceremonial Hokage uniform. Ninja elements were interwoven into armor that harked back to the samurai era. "Ikuzo!" He gave the order. All of them disappeared. Below Konoha, the corridors leading to root headquarters were patrolled by 2 shinobi. They were immediately taken down by a huge sword and a long staff. Hiruzen escorted his troops past the 2 bodies. Given the size of the halls, Naruto decided that using Shodai no Tsurugi for this mission would be more appropriate. He even outfitted the unique sheath he discovered in the vault, which hung on his lower back and contained several sheaths for his sword or swords. However, he would use Masamune if it were feasible. Hiruzen halted when they came to a conjunction that led to the root headquarters. "Danzo is up ahead. Me and Naruto will hunt him down. He will most likely have many guards. The rest of you split up and go either left or right," he stated. They gave a nod. He smiled and said, "One last thing, don't die." Nearly everyone smiled back at them. Hiyashi could hardly control a lip twitch due to excessive facial muscle atrophy. Kakashi's amusing eye smile was also inadmissible. Naruto's swords were sheathed down the hall opposite the one they had come from. He followed Hiruzen. Junin and the clan heads nodded while the others went right. The clan heads would stick together and go left. Tonight, Root would be subjected to hell with the heads of the clan. Together with Kuromaru, Tsume tore through a Nei Anbu. She tore the shinobi to pieces with her Shikaku no Jutsu, quadruped technique, and Gatsuga, fang over fang or double piercing fang. Cloth, skin, muscle, and bone were all consumed at record speed by Shibi's insects, which ate the next shinobi whole. Their cries of agony were met with no mercy from him. Shuza began charging at people, slamming them with tons of force, shattering their skeletons as he grew his fist. Then he grew larger and began to tread on them as a man would tread on ants. It was completely dark when Shikaku looked up at his friend's head, which nearly touched the ceiling. He let out a sigh before using his Kageme no Jutsu technique to immobilize them, while Hiyashi managed to sneak past each shinobi's guard and kill them all at once. Tapped on the chest. Although the Hyuga had come across as haughty and distant to others, it also made it clear that they were that good. Inoichi was having a great time. He had captured several shinobi and made them murder their fellow fighters. They all saw the second wave coming in after finishing the first. "I'm winning so far," was Hiyashi's arrogant response. Tsume yelled, "Not all of us can kill with a touch. Remember, the winner gets to set up a marriage contract with Namikaze-sama." He reminded them of this. The others gave a headshake looking at the still charged wave. Shikaku said, "I'm glad I have a boy." "Agreed," Shuza said, "though didn't your wife split up with you? Maybe she will go for Namikaze-sama. She along with the rest of the women of Konoha loved his father, Shuza concluded awkwardly. Shikaku went pale as they charged the wave. The others laughed. Alongside the Junin, they were in an enormous training room. The Hokage mountain was the size of the room. The air was filled with screams. Guy yelled, 41, as he broke a Kunoichi's neck. As he destroyed a nin with a kaiten, an indifferent Kakashi uttered the words, 45, Housenka no Jutsu. Another shouted, 50, as he threw kunai left and right while mounted on a gigantic snake. Anko was content. Kurenai responded, 42, she had broken a shinobi's mind with a genjutsu. As he spun around his opponents, blood flying from his heme technique, which he had used to extend the reach of his trench knives, Asuma responded inanely, 56. Anko screamed, bullshit Sarutobi, as she negligently killed a charging shinobi while snakes protruded from her coat sleeve. She yelled, I could have sworn you were on 47. She laughed in response. The remaining shinobi surrounded them, and they regrouped in the center. They all looked at the nearby nin, and Kakashi said, guys, let's do this. Both of them folded their arms. It's time to unleash hell and perform the Taju Hachiman, in which several people use the Hachiman simultaneously. Kaimon. Kai, was the Junin's roar. The shinobi around them went pale. With Naruto and Hiruzen, 10 shinobi were standing, on guard. When Naruto and Hiruzen encountered a guarded door, they suddenly hurried both of them. Karyu Enden was the kaiten that Hiruzen used to unleash hell. The 10 shinobi perished at once. Naruto's perspiration fell indeed. Kami is not a shinobi. The door flew off its hinges into a massive room teeming with shinobi when Naruto kicked it down. He took out his Masamune and threw aside the Shodai no Tsurugi. Hiruzen, the Sarutobi, called forth his adamantine staff. Danzo, who had a cold expression on his face, was at the far end of the room. He gave the order, kill them both. Even though they were aware that the Kami no Shinobi would kill them, the assembled Anbu charged forward. Hiruzen and Naruto ran to meet them alongside Danzo. Danzo had exposed a hidden Sharingan by tearing off the bandages covering his face. After that, he removed the remaining bandages from his arm, exposing several Sharingan grafts. He was horrified to see Sarutobi tearing through his army. A variety of jutsu were used, ranging from Raiden to Kaiten. He saw Hiruzen unleash more jutsu than he could count while avoiding even the use of hand seals. Kaiten, a well-groomed shinobi, Futon, a chopped-up Kunoichi, Raiden hurled himself at him, and an Anbu threw himself in the way. Suiden defeated numerous shinobi, and Doden stopped the combination of Kaiten and Futon. Danzo was startled to see that Naruto was keeping up with Hiruzen. When he turned to watch him, he caught more than 2 at once, and his sword cuts were wild. Then he took an action he would never forget. Blizzard, Naruto said. 10 shinobi attempted to rush Naruto, but he was caught by a lotus of ice that bloomed around him. They were impaled, the blood dripping in mass, turning the ice bloody. Hayaten methods, How? Everyone was shocked to think this. Faraga. Was Naruto's hollow command. The flames from Naruto's fingertips consumed everything in their path. Much like the flames of an old dragon, the shinobi he was up against were so completely burned that not even ashes were left behind, that more than half of them perished. Alongside Naruto. It was a harsh world. It was kill or be killed. Naruto tore through the shinobi, disgust rising in his chest as he claimed more lives. He focused and made a broad arc with his sword. His roar was, Koku Yeba Taisen. Then, although some shinobi managed to avoid the move by clinging to the walls, the technique claimed limbs and lives. An arc of energy shot from his sword and cut everyone in its path. As he put more energy into his blade, Naruto narrowed his focus even further. Still perfectly balanced, he swung his sword like a madman. His slashes were accompanied by several arcs of energy. There were more fatalities alongside Sarutobi. Hiruzen watched icily as he created corpses out of living people using a practical tactic he had acquired during combat. He killed another with a kaiden from his hands. He completed the final Anbu, who was clutching a wakizashi and trembling. His air supply was cut off when he struck him in the throat with a fist. He rejoined Naruto, and the two of them strode in Danzo's direction. "This is my fight, Naruto. You stay out of it. I will finish him personally," instructed Hiruzen. Hiruzen was aware that Naruto would avoid getting involved in the fight, but Naruto did not answer. Danzo got up and said he wasn't as disabled as he seemed. He competed with Hiruzen for the Hokage office for a reason in his own right. He was strong. Hiruzen met Danzo in the center as he ran ahead. With Junin and the clan heads. They had split up, but they had reunited in the midst of the conjunction. Kurenai had a few cuts on her face, and Shikaku was stabbed in the thigh, but that was the only real injury because of the Hachiman. Kakashi was limping a little. Before being interrupted by the enormous chakra buildup from the direction that Naruto and Hiruzen went to battle, they examined themselves to check for injuries. The chakra was so strong that some falling debris fell as a result. "Let's meet up with Hokage-sama and Naruto-sama," Sume replied. Kakashi gave her a funny look. "A cheeky Naruto-sama, eh?" he asked. Sume just gave him a glare. Her sultry response was, "Of course, he is a Namikaze. It's only right I call him Sama." Everybody laughed at her alongside Naruto. Naruto remained composed while the two fabled ninjas ripped the room apart. The other person's jutsu matched theirs. Raiden divided Doden. Doden protected Kaden. Suiden dispersed Futon, and Kaden ate Suiden. They repeatedly threw different jutsu at each other in an attempt to gain the upper hand. The chakra of his allies landed beside him, and he twitched. Anko asked Naruto, "Why aren't you helping Hokage-sama?" "He told me to stay out of it. It seems he is stressed about the whole situation," he responded. "However, if Danzo manages to overwhelm or catch Hiruzen off guard, then I will intervene," he said. In the interim, Naruto took out his copy of Loveless. Kakashi's Icha Icha did the same alongside Hiruzen. Danzo ducked and countered with a roundhouse kick from a crouching position, but Hiruzen blocked and grabbed the offending limb before throwing Danzo towards the wall. Hiruzen's left hook nearly caught Danzo in the face. Danzo began going through hand seals after landing on the wall. He yelled, "Suiden! Suiryuden no Jutsu!" A dragon made of water from Naruto's melted blizzard raced in the direction of Hiruzen. Doden. Doryuheki, returned Hiruzen. The mud he spat out created a huge wall that shielded him from the dragon's projectile. When the water dragon subsided, he was standing on top of the wall. A giant crater had formed in the wall. Danzo had a hateful expression on his face as he stood in front of the wall. Hiruzen flew in his direction. Danzo ducked when he kicked him in the chin. Hiruzen simply vaulted over the leg and delivered a horizontal spinning kick to Danzo's head. Despite Danzo's attempt to surprise him with a side thrust kick to the spine, Danzo was sent to the ground by the force alone, and his body was surrounded by a crater. "You are too weak to lead Konoha. It will die with your pathetic teaching," Danzo said, looking up at Hiruzen in a daze, before being permanently silenced by a kunai to the throat. The last thing he saw was Hiruzen's icy face. With the viewers, all but Naruto watched in awe as the Hokage engaged in combat. It's been a long time since they've seen Hiruzen kick ass like that. Moving to the desk where Danzo was seated, Naruto looked through all of the files inside and on it. Seems like he had a few dealings in the disasters that had happened to Konoha, Hokage-sama, he told Hiruzen. After setting the body on fire, Hiruzen arrived to ensure that the Sharingan could not be taken. He looked through the files himself. He let out a sigh. Together with all the transactions, Hiruzen sealed them in a scroll he kept in a kunai pouch. Naruto unleashed a Fira that would destroy every corpse while preserving the buildings. He turned around and followed the other nin out of the catacombs after staring at the location where Danzo was burned. When he noticed the wounded individuals strolling alongside Hiruzen, he applied a tiny cure to halt the bleeding and partially seal the wounds. They gave him a grateful glance. He returned the nod. It appeared to be around 8 p.m. when they stepped outside into the chilly night air. Hiruzen made a decision after considering it for some time. "Naruto, I want you to lead a genin team," he replied. Naruto gave Hiruzen a look. "I don't think they would follow the orders of someone they perceive to be inferior to themselves." "Hiruzen," said Naruto. Although Hiruzen nodded, he responded icily, "They will do as they're told, even if I have to punish them myself." The idea made Naruto laugh. In charge of a genin team, particularly one that used to mock him? Funny. "So be it, but it must be people I will not strangle with my bare hands, so Kiba and Sasuke will not be placed on my group." He reached an agreement with Hiruzen. Indeed, Sasuke will likely go with Kakashi, since he is a ninjutsu specialist that will complement Sasuke, as he is both a ninjutsu specialist, and has the potential to awaken the Sharingan which Kakashi has. Kiba will likely get sorted towards a tracking group, either Kurenai or Kakashi's group would take him, Hiruzen clarified. Naruto let out a loud laugh. "Your group will probably be a medic assault group," Hiruzen added. As they all made their way to the Hokage Tower, Naruto nodded. "If that is the case, it would be better if I had people that had amazing chakra control. If I got the 3 Kunoichi, Ino, Sakura, and Hinata, I might be able to turn them into a mini Tsunade, and even teach them elemental jutsu corresponding with their affinity. Konoha needs more inin that can take care of themselves," he concluded. Hiruzen was only able to nod. He would be presenting the concept of a 4-man squad to the upcoming class of shinobi who would be graduating. Tsunade came up with the original concept and, after much deliberation, decided to incorporate it into the system. "My family vault has much knowledge on anatomy and medical procedures. I'm sure they would be pleased with learning this. They seem like the girls to rather heal than fight," said Naruto. The notion was criticized by Shikaku, who said, "I think that having a boy sensei with 3 girls is asking for trouble." Hiruzen. Naruto laughed, and Hiruzen slapped his face because he had forgotten that they were teenagers and needed to manage their hormones. "Nevertheless, it shall be done. I trust Naruto to behave himself." And the 3 girls were brought up in high society, even Sakura, as she was the daughter of one of the councilwomen, he said. Shikaku nodded, as did the others who found it problematic. Hiyashi felt both pride at having a Namikaze train his daughter and resentment at his poor daughter being subordinate to a boy sensei. Inoichi shared this opinion. With a knowing glance at the 2 clan heads, Naruto declared with assurance, "Trust me, I won't do anything to your daughters." Reluctantly, the 2 nodded, despite the fact that they had no influence whatsoever. When they reached the Hokage Tower, they hurried into Hiruzen's office. "Well done on the mission, everyone. S-rank pay will be moved to your accounts, and it shall be marked on your profile the success of the mission." Dismissed. Hiruzen offered his congratulations. After giving a nod, the assembled shinobi departed. "When do I pick up my team?" Naruto asked Hiruzen, glancing out to Konoha. "Next week. Good luck," Hiruzen replied. He jumped through the window and floated outside. Taking the remark as a dismissal, he flew slowly in the direction of his mansion, eager to take a shower, eat, and then go to bed. "It will be interesting next week. Tell me about any story ideas you may have, and I'll check to see if they fit in. Additionally, let me know which pairing you would like to see with Naruto and why. I'll try to fit it in if I think they're acceptable, and the person who correctly predicts what I'm going to switch this story over with will receive a point, which they can use to decide on something. However, you can STFU and GTFO if it's incredibly absurd, like Sasuke gaining superpowers or Naruto becoming gay." The following are the genin teams. Team Ino Yamanaka, Sakura Haruno, and Hinata Hyuga, Naruto Sensei. Sensei Kakashi, Sasuke Uchiha, Kiba Inuzuka, and Sasuke Fangirl Amy make up the team. Sensei Kurenai, Shikamaru Nara, Choji Akamichi, and Shino Aburame make up the team. Am I not a sadistic person because I caused Sasuke to suffer because of a fangirl? Insert evil genius laugh and menacing smile. Anyway, have fun after a week. The sunlight coming in through the window of the Namikaze mansion roused one Naruto Namikaze. He yawned as he sat up, exhausted from the week of non-stop training and the numerous meetings he had with the Hokage and the other Junin. Kurenai came up with the concept of gathering the teams and training them together in order to foster unity and teamwork among the nin. Hiruzen had agreed when she raised it during the meetings. Recalling that today was his team meeting and training day, Naruto let out a sigh. He got out of bed, popped his shoulder joints, and took a shower. He took a shower like everyone else and then went outside to change. In addition to the belt that held the shoulder guards in place, he wore his trademark black leather pants, black leather boots, and trench coat with shoulder armor bearing the Konoha symbol. To begin aerial combat training, he created clones. Despite the slim chances of fighting in the air, they would square off against Masamune and Shodai no Tsurugi because it never hurts to have your bases covered. When he noticed the time, he was in the kitchen. Nearly 8:30 o'clock had arrived. With a sigh, he grabbed a couple of apples to munch on before heading to the front door. He was struck with an idea as he was making his way to the door. He had been practicing his singing and playing his instrument and discovered that, judging by the applause of his audience, he was fairly good after a late night at a local bar. He had performed a song for Kurenai and Enko. His virginity barely survived his departure. It was just the bad timing of a little mission from Hiruzen, not that he was trying to leave. He pondered whether the instruments could serve as a substitute for hand seals and serve as a conduit for chakra to carry out techniques. After giving it some thought, he picked up his guitar, a pen, and a pad to write ideas on, which were placed next to the front door. The thought made him a little giddy. In the shape of a tattoo, he had secured the guitar to his right ring finger. Then, while jotting down thoughts in his pad, he left his mansion. He was at the Nin Academy in no time at all, and he walked to his class. He encountered Kurenai and Kakashi en route. After deciding to join the Shinobi System's Strategic and Logistic Department, Asuma was elevated to the position of head of Strategic War Tactics, where he oversaw all mission tactics and information pertaining to enemy nations and Nin. His promotion was unrelated to the fact that he was his father's son. Sincere as he walked toward his former classroom with Kakashi and Kurenai, he braced himself for the potential shitstorm they might cause. Using the genin, there was no denying that Uchiha Sasuke was a genius. He had impressed his father into acknowledging his relationship with his son by performing the Kaden Gokyaku no Jutsu at a very young age. When he was still a Konoha ninja, he had observed his brother and picked up a few tips. He was skilled at using another kunai to change a kunai's direction. He was also capable of sealless henge no jutsu. He was therefore also a haughty and aloof individual. He was too high for anyone to reach. Even that moron possesses chakra levels that are exclusive to high-level shinobi Naruto. He laughed at the notion that he was a ninja because, despite having more chakra than he did, his control was terrible. Sasuke dismissed such ideas with a shake of his head and focused on Iruka-sensei. The two fangirls on either side of him were vying for his attention, but he tried to ignore them. He realized that Naruto was a helpful diversion for fangirls, which is why he thought of him so much. At a particularly loud Sakura yell, he winced. Iruka gave everyone a fierce look and told them to stop talking. The quiet was overwhelming. Many, including Sasuke, were moved by Iruka's brief speech. Ahem, as I was saying, you as Konoha Nin have a responsibility as protectors, to protect Konohagakaru no Sato, and all its beliefs. The will of fire will live inside all of you as you go forth to become great shinobi. He said to the first team. Now the teams will be. When he caught up to his brother, Sasuke thought of the different things he would do to him, so he stopped listening. He was playing with a pen when it broke, and Team 7 will be Uchiha Sasuke, Inazuka Kiba and Amy, Iruka stated. Before Amy, the fangirl orphan, let out a deafening scream. Sasuke briefly displayed pure horror before he schooled his face. Iruka gave his expression a funny glance. Your Junin sensei will be Hitaki Kakashi. Team 8 will be Nara Shikamaru, Akamichi Choji, Aburame Shino. Your Junin sensei will be Yuichi Kurenai. Since Team 9 is still in circulation from last term, Team 10 will be Yamanaka Ino, Haruno Sakura, and Hyuga Hinata. Your Junin sensei will be, what? He yelled. When their sensei yelled, all of the students who had been busy griping or celebrating about their team were startled and recoiled. The door opened before Iruka could gather himself and declare Team 10's sensei. Behind them came a blonde god, a very attractive brunette woman with red wine eyes and a strange dress that did little to conceal her figure, and a tall, silver-haired man wearing a mask and slanted Hia-8. Eyes of cerulean calmly gazed out at the world while hair the color of spun gold flowed behind him. His face was cool and serene, handsome and smooth. His trench coat, which was fastened by an odd belt that covered his stomach, was decorated with shoulder guards. He was dressed in black. It was the 6 marks on his face, however, that attracted everyone's attention: the distinctive facial features of Uzumaki Naruto. All of the students gaped like fools. After swallowing, Iruka uttered, Your Junin sensei will be Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto grinned. Uchiha Sasuke gave a hateful glare. What on earth possibly caused this to occur? In his mind, he raged. The idea that Naruto was a Junin was absurd, blasphemous, and sacrilegious. Gazing at her secret crush, Naruto, Hyuga Hinata flushed. Since last week, he had grown considerably more attractive, and she couldn't stop the blood from pouring into her face. He was more composed now, but he was still Naruto, still himself, and still confident. She gave him a smile, and to her surprise, he returned it. She nearly passed out but braced herself. Sakura Haruno gazed. She was dazed and thought, what the $% carrot hash, when did Naruto become so? This was him so handsome. I concur. Let's put Sasuke out of our minds and focus on that, whistled one inner Sakura. Sakura didn't argue with her inner self for some reason compared to Sasuke. Naruto at least treated her better, but she winced at Naruto's icy stare. Whatever transformation he underwent also altered his perception of her. Her heart began to race as she stared at him, and she began to feel dizzy. She thought dizzily, what is this guy made of? Even if he glares at me, I'm getting excited. Naruto nearly palmed his face. Kakashi said, Team 10, Team 7, and Team 8 follow us. Happy to have such a strong and serious shinobi to train them. The genin that would be known as the Rookie 9 got to their feet when Kakashi pulled out his Icha and burst out laughing. The joy was dashed. Naruto only palmed his face at that point. Roof of Konoha Academy. Naruto, Kakashi, and Kurenai leaned against the roof railing of Konoha Academy. They observed the aspiring genin conversing with one another. Naruto was the main topic of discussion while he was silently laughing. Naruto heard bits of conversation, most of which were new, hot, powerful, and namikaze. His laughter became louder. The only sound on the roof was the whistling wind flinging leaves. Kakashi gave a clap of his hands. He smiled kindly and said, "Okay, let's get to know each other. Why don't you introduce yourself?" "Why don't you introduce yourself, Sensei, since we don't know you?" Sakura interrupted. Kakashi stiffened, but only Naruto noticed Kurenai was occupied with trying to use her glare to burn the Icha book in Kakashi's hand. Flaming glares, huh? Naruto thought, interesting idea. He took out a pad and pen and jotted down ideas for both that and his ONPU, music. Ninjutsu. Sasuke and Shikamaru both arched an eyebrow in response. Naruto didn't even look at them after spending the week with Kakashi and the other Junin. Naruto became accustomed to the responsibilities of being a high-class nin, so he disregarded Kakashi's introduction. When it was finally his turn, he spent a short time writing in his pad before storing it as a tattoo on his left ring finger, similar to his guitar on his right ring finger. My name is Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. My likes are personal, my dislikes are bigots, hypocrites, and a few other things I don't care to mention. My hobbies is inventing family techniques, and playing my guitar. My dream is personal as well. He spoke quietly, without disclosing anything. Shikamaru said, "Wait, Namikaze, does that mean you're the son of Yondaime-sama?" Naruto simply created a kage bunshin and had his father be henge. They stood together. "Yes, I am. We look remarkably alike, don't you think?" was Naruto's next response. Hinata's eyes were wide when she was born. According to her father, she was once proposed as a wife to the Namikaze clan's heir. If this. Her thoughts were interrupted when she passed out. Shikamaru let out a sigh. This would turn out to be quite problematic later on. For some reason, the Yondaime's child, Naruto. Thank God Kiba's staring at Kurenai was sufficient proof that he was a pervert. Even though he was a boisterous and hot-headed child, he wasn't a moron, not dumb. But not Sasuke or Shikamaru. He immediately realized that he should never offend Yondaime-sama. After learning that Naruto was his child in his faintest daydream, the man would have access to jutsu that Sasuke would never imagine. In addition, Naruto's alpha status intimidated Kiba into submission. Sasuke stopped. What? Numbly, he thought, how could an orphan who eats ramen, wears oranges, has no talent, and is hardly worth noticing be the Yondaime's son? This elevated Naruto above Sasuke in both kinship and status as a ninja, because Uchiha had previously served as Hokage. The scowl he had been keeping for his brother was directed at Naruto. When he noticed that Naruto was laughing at him, it became more intense. With a gape, Ino's mind went back to the moment he brought his parents 2 flowers. Sakura flinched. This would not go well. Her assaulting Yondaime's son? God, it wouldn't even be funny if her mother ever found out. She would be grounded. In addition, Yondaime was her father's idol and he was a nin who worked with her. She would be extremely fortunate to escape this situation unscathed. Choji was simply distracted by his bag of chips barbecue flavor. Shino gave a nod himself. It was logical. That specific shade of blonde hair and that specific shade of cerulean eyes were unique to the Yondaime and Naruto, as he considered the puzzle that Naruto was. He pushed up his glasses. For example, Naruto can summon a kage bunshin just as easily as a henge, but why would the bunshin no just to be so difficult for him? Amy simply ignored him, gazing at Sasuke with a fearsome and impressive single-mindedness. Naruto's laughter intensified. Kurenai followed by saying, "The Hokage has approved of keeping the groups together for training, to promote teamwork and cohesion with other nin on missions. As such, you will be taking your exam for Miss Junin tomorrow, to see if you will be genin." "What?" everyone exclaimed. Shino, To Naruto just gave a gloomy laugh. He admired their outrage that they weren't truly genin. Did you really think that a henge, a few bunshin and a written test would really qualify you for being a genin? He joked. Stupidly, Sasuke said, like you could even do that, Baka. He was under the most incredible killing intent he had ever encountered, not that he had encountered any before. Naruto was standing over him, glaring at his very soul, when he looked up. Before darkening clouds swirled to where his hands were pointing, he raised his hand and held it to the sunny sky. Twisting photon bolts in search of additional energy, lightning danced in the sky. In the distance, thunder roared. Don't challenge people who are above you, genin, he grumbled. His pupils widened into a predator's eyes. A savage snarl of disdain punctuated the predatory statement. Kakashi put his hand firmly on Naruto's shoulder before releasing his grip on Sasuke's soul and pulling away. Naruto gave him a stern look. Sasuke, incidentally, began to smell a little funny. Slowly, the ominous clouds left Konoha and headed back to their origin. Then, in a whirl of black feathers, Naruto vanished. Troublesome, Shikamaru muttered in his misery. He thought, I hate it when I'm right. Alongside Naruto. As he emerged from his mansion, Naruto mumbled angrily. Usually, he was able to control his anger better than the anger that he harbors inside of him, just waiting to be let loose when he killed those rude Anbu. It had begun to grow stronger and is now nearly intolerable. However, he had a diamond will, so he restrained his bloodlust when necessary. In combat, unsealing his pad, pen, and guitar, Naruto created a KB, Cage Bunshin, which will always be referred to as KB unless I have Naruto call out the technique, to continue the brainstorming. After reading the description, Naruto picked up the summoning scroll of the Uzumaki. It was, apparently, an unprecedented summoning contract. A contract for calling forth ancient mythological creatures. There were a few names listed as it happens. Toads were not the only animal affected by this. It featured summons of creatures with power comparable to that of Biju. One was named Bahamut, and the other Valifor. Odin is the summoning boss's name. The names of these summonses, for some reason, made his scalp tingle and sent shivers down his spine. He set the scroll down. He had a feeling that he wasn't yet prepared for it. His sixth and seventh senses were going haywire, so call it a man's intuition. I find this funny for some reason. Additionally, he did not disregard his sixth sense, which is referred to as SSS. He was beaten by two inebriated men in an alleyway the last time he defied the SSS. However, Naruto wasn't the only person admitted to the hospital. He had been beaten, and it was one of the very few times when he began to fight back. People learned to back off for the sake of Icha. He broke bones when he was 10 years old. And it's like cornering an animal when you corner Naruto. Very risky. Naruto took a seat beneath the apple tree in the training field. The time had come to visit a certain fox and exact some well-earned retribution. Hiyashi was startled by the resident Jinchuriki's ominous cackling. I don't want to know, the speaker said. Naruto studied the copy of the Forbidden Scroll he had taken carefully before meditating to dive into the Shiki Fuin. When he read the Shiki Fuin, he was taken aback to discover that the Heiken and Shisho Fuins were woven with an intricate slavery seal. When combined with the Shiki Fuin, this would grant him the same commanding authority over the prisoner as the Shinigami. And the Shinigami was not denied. There was something boring about the thought. He heard a bell-like sound in his head, indicating that something that had been anticipated since the beginning of time had actually occurred. Done. There was a certain arrogance in the voice that said that. As Naruto read it, he grinned. There was an irony to this, that Naruto did not miss the real demon is under the control of the demon in the face of humanity. It was poetic justice. Into the Shiki Fuin, Naruto dove inside the Fuin Shiki. When Naruto opened his eyes, a destroyed city with structures the size of mountains was in front of him. There were concrete blocks the size of a small hill, twisted metal, and broken glass everywhere. There were broken buildings everywhere he looked, including one that appeared to have been cut at a 45-degree angle. The upper portion had fallen off and struck the floor. Murmuring, Naruto said, "So this is the seal." Over the wreckage, a dim red light was visible in the distance. He got up and flew in its direction. As he got closer, he noticed a huge cage in a larger crater with a horrified expression on its face. The Kyuubi no Kitsune was lying inside the cage. As much as a demon's face can convey horror, that is. Smelling, Kyuubi turned to face the fallen angel Naruto. He took a small step back and then appeared to pause. He chose to pay attention to the angel as he lay down on the cage floor. He doesn't really have a choice anymore. Naruto arrived here seeking answers as much as retribution. The Forbidden Scroll was read by him. Additionally, it required a substance known as a materia for its spells, and without them, the spells could not be performed. Naruto was accustomed to hearing that he was incapable of doing something. Nevertheless, he attempted to do them. You're not going to be Hokage. You're not even capable of a Bunshin. Your henge is incorrect. He disproved them. He wouldn't be held back from such an action, however. He wanted to know how he could perform the spells without materia. He approached the Kyuubi without any fear. He ordered, "I want answers, you will give them to me." Kyuubi replied, "Ask, and so I shall answer. How am I able to conjure ice and fire and lightning without the use of materia?" replied Naruto. "The same way your ancestors used to conjure ice and fire and lightning, by bending," replied Kyuubi. Kyuubi, who was aware that the angel was the new avatar, gazed at him in confusion. The ancients were laughing heartily with a man who had a blue arrow on his bald head somewhere in the livestream. With Pain and Madara, both of them were reading an old tablet that was allegedly carved by the Rakudo Sennin himself while enveloped in darkness. The tablet was illuminated by 2 candles, but the darkness around it prevented it from shining. In the same way, the sky will rain fire again, the end will occur again, and the child of prophecy will once again save us. The earth will tremble and tremble in suppressed rage, the seas will thrash in rage, the sky will darken, the mountains will burst in wrath, and the 4 winds will rise in a frenzy. The remainder could not be read. They were unable to decipher the runes used to write it. This is, Pain stumbled. This is a tablet written by the Rakudo Sennin. It tells of a cataclysm that will end the war, and a child of prophecy. This seems to have happened before. I cannot dismiss this. For a man who defeated the dread Lord Jubi, to have written this to warn us of the coming end, it is obviously true. Your Rinnegan is proof he wrote this, for only you can read it, Madara said. If what is on this tablet comes true, Madara-sama, with all due respect, we must step up production, if we are to gift your chosen one with the Gedo Mazo. But wouldn't it make sense to be able to pull the Biju out of the Jinchuriki without killing them? They may be able to help the chosen one with his duty, Pain replied. Madara reasoned that doing so would lengthen the time needed to power the Gedo Mazo and raise the possibility of the Biju escaping, but perhaps the time and danger associated with the extraction process were worthwhile if the Jinchuriki could actually assist Namikaze Dono with the impending end. Madara gave one nod. Pain only needed that to go get the others and inform them of the change in plans. Alongside Naruto, after facing the Kyuubi, Naruto had awakened to reality. He made the decision to put the Kyuubi on hold for the time being in order to organize his approach to the avatar business that had fallen into his lap. Furthermore, it didn't help that the Kyuubi told him about his great ancestor Sephiroth. The devastation of just one side of his family was incredible. It was a lot to process. It is said that Sephiroth's destruction nearly brought about the end of the world. However, the final fight of the Avatar is said to have permanently altered the world's geography. A blast of wind stronger than a Renkuden erupted as he pounded his fist at the closest tree. He gave his temples a rub. He had to relax. The front gate seals came on just as he considered unwinding. With a sigh, he brushed off his trench coat and stood up. Upon arriving at the front gate, he was taken aback to see Anko standing there, seemingly concerned about him. Kurenai was standing behind her, looking just as anxious. He just gave them an apologetic look and let them in. After all, he had left them to the Genins. That's a really cruel thing to do. Recalling the part where he wanted to perform the Hiraishin, he made the decision to ask Kyuubi if he could finish. After briefly glowing, Kyuubi uttered the words, "It is done, Naruto-sama." Naruto had just said, "Thank you," and blinked. Kyuubi bowed. Naruto became somewhat alarmed. He led the beautiful women into his mansion while shaking his head. The 2 women grinned with excited expressions as he reached for his guitar on the way to the kitchen table. After all, Naruto was a talented singer. He had a somewhat dejected expression on his face as they sat down and asked him if he was okay and other things. "It's getting harder and harder to control my anger. I can feel it bubbling under the surface, even now," he responded. As Kurenai and Anko put it, "We have faith in you." That was the only thing required. Naruto gave the 2 a smile. Like a Christmas tree, they glowed. To decompress, Naruto took up his guitar and began to play slowly. Kurenai liked to believe that she was a girl who didn't waste her time wooing men. Although Anko was present, which annoyed her for some reason, Naruto's willingness to open up to her had changed her perception of him from that of a Jinchuriki to that of a Namikaze, and finally to that of a fellow Junin. He reminded her of Naruto, the Jinchuriki who had suffered because of something that wasn't his fault. It brought her joy and sorrow. He was both sad for what he had to endure and glad that he felt secure enough to tell her about it. The area where the curse seal used to lie was lightly rubbed by Anko after witnessing the pain it occasionally caused her. Naruto himself had gotten rid of it. He was left with Anko's lap and his face full of Anko's lips following the lengthy sealing. She was crying, so it was also kind of sweet. Anko grinned as she glanced at Naruto. "You're here, Naruto-kun." Even though his applause was quiet, it was as sincere as an embrace. He gave them both a smile. They approached him and gave him a hug. He gestured back. Naruto grinned because it had been a while since he had felt joy feeling his anger subside. He made the snap decision to try to be happy in order to keep the monster inside of him. Not the Kyuubi, but the result of the hatred and anger he had absorbed as a child, from emerging in order for him to proudly tell the villagers that they were mistaken for judging him and for giving up on him. He is not a monster, as the villagers believe. Furthermore, your motivations, not your deeds, are what turn you into a monster. Naruto dragged a hand down his face and sighed. A new day. He had to meet up with the other genin and Junin at Training Ground 7, which the Hokage himself had approved to be theirs for all time. Getting up at 6 in the morning, Naruto went about his daily routine, which included showering, eating, and creating clones to perform various tasks as usual. Naruto glanced at his recollection of the clones. Harvest. If you will, others were studying geography and the history of other countries. Naruto reached a conclusion that most most of them, have already reached. The elemental nations are in a terrible state. Yuki no Kuni is one such example. After stealing the throne from his brother, the current daimyo is a jerk who controls everything with an iron grip. He even dispatched Nin to find the real heir, his niece. Shivering Kuni wasn't all that much better. Nami no Gato, one of the wealthiest men in the world, killed their daimyo. He has a monopoly on the whole island chain. Rumor had it that he had connections to the majority of the criminal organizations in the world. In terms of their governance and economy as a whole, many more nations experienced comparable or even worse situations. In any case, it was as depressing as Naruto could get. He had his own issues to deal with. For example, finding helpful lessons to teach two girls who have ignored, hated, or abused him, as well as a quiet girl who has a crush on him. He glanced at the one coffee cup he was holding. I'm going to need more coffee. Sasuke would be there, he remembered abruptly. Make some coffee for that, at the 7th training ground. With several stab wounds to Itachi's arms, legs, chest, and groin, Sasuke stood over his brother's lifeless body with a wild laugh. Sasuke conjured up a vision of a certain bell-wearing Shinigami. Sakura Haruno said, "Sasuke-kun, are you alright?" Sasuke was startled out of his reverie by the sight of his worst enemy, that worthless, foolish girl who was incapable of even defeating Amy. When he noticed that she was slowly bringing her hand up to his thigh, he felt a little dead inside. He gave her a scowl. She retreated. He turned to face the bridge and started toward it. He and the other genin had arrived early and had been discussing the new Junin method of genin training. Well, he didn't contribute, but he listened. With the exception of Anbu, no ground training session has ever taken place in Konoha, who had a covert base of their own. Looking at the new genin group that had been genin for a year, Sasuke scowled. "My team will be able to bring out the youthful flames in all your students," Guy said, inviting his group over after feeling a little excluded. His yelling this in front of his group had only made them feel more ashamed. Except for Lee, that is, they were apparently very strong genin who had served on multiple missions of C and even B rank. When Sasuke noticed that, with a few exceptions, all of the genin were mingling with one another, he schooled his features similar to Shino, who was sitting and meditating off to the side. The boy was a serious, sensible, and true shinobi, and Sasuke respected him. There was Shikamaru lying on the bridge railing, muttering, "Troublesome," as he looked up at the clear sky. Beside him, Shoji was conversing with Tenten and Ino when he wasn't stuffing his face. That is, Kiba and Akamaru were engaged in a fierce game of tag. The girls were gossiping and doing what girls do, while Hinata sat quietly next to Ino and Tenten. Sasuke shuddered slightly. Alongside the Junin, Anko gazed at Asuma, the smoking nin, incredulously. "You got fired?" "Yup," was his reply. Oddly enough, Kurenai and Guy were laughing at Asuma. "I got fired because someone planted false information in a report of mine, and the price was a few S-rank mission going wrong." Very, very few S-rank missions were ever carried out. S-rank had a mission of the, "oh shit, that's TSUNADES fist" variety. It was unfortunate to learn that some S-ranks had been blown, because it was extremely uncommon for any mission to be classified as S-rank, a negative thing. Anko laughed at him and said, "Unlucky." Asuma returned the glare. Asuma smoked his cancer cigarette. Naruto said, "Put that out, Asuma." Naruto was leaning against a tree when the assembled Junin turned around, startled. Asuma yelled, "Don't freaking do that. You're Junin, fix it," Naruto commented. Kurenai merely grinned in a small sense of pride for the boy, while Asuma glared in mock rage. Not surprisingly, they failed to detect Naruto, as she was staring at the most famous prankster in Konoha's history. Naruto wanted to be caught, which is why you were able to capture him. Naruto could stay away from everyone. He could hide that well. However, this talent is rarely acknowledged. Shinobi were warriors to them. They were partially correct, but the ability to flee and hide is a very useful skill. It prevented fatalities. Anko glanced at Naruto. He had the same sexy appearance and clothes, but the enormous scroll on his back was different. Anko asked sweetly, "What you got there, Naruto-kun?" The surrounding area was chilled by the responding laugh. "Oh, just some things, to help train my students," Naruto replied. "Ohio, Mina," Kakashi said joyfully as he emerged in a shunshin, disregarding the few glares he received for being late. The presence of Guy, Anko, and Asuma caused Kakashi to double-take. Kakashi questioned, "What are you three doing here?" "Anko's here to help train the kunoichi. Guy came cause he felt left out, and Asuma got fired and was lonely," replied Naruto. After deadpan for a while, Kakashi produced his icha-icha. Anko questioned, "So, why were you late this time, Kakashi?" "I was filling out some paperwork for the teams," he responded. Naruto turned to face the other Junin. "Why is it that even though that sounds possible, I still think he's full of shit?" replied Naruto. While the others laughed, Kakashi gave Naruto a mocking glare. Naruto turned toward Training Ground 7 and jumped into the air, saying, "Let's go greet the locals." After making the leap, he didn't descend again. Kakashi muttered, "Show off," as he raised his head from the book to the sky. As they vanished in a whirl of smoke and foliage, the others felt a little silly. Using the genin. The Junin sensei's tardiness went unnoticed by the genin. They spoke with the new team too much and discussing Naruto's ancestry and his ascension to Junin. Tenten asked in amazement, "Namikaze, as in Nami freaking K's, as in Nami oh my god it's the Hirishin case?" Sakura replied, "Yup." Recalling her parents' response to the news, she winced. It hadn't been lovely. They do resemble each other though. It's pretty humbling to think that a shinobi village couldn't see it for how long, 10 years or more, Choji replied. Everyone gave a nod. Shino tensed as his Kikai bugs alerted him to an approaching chakra that was at least as big as the Hokage's. However, he was perplexed when his Kikai informed him that the source was high up. Resembling a bird however, no bird possessed that much chakra anyhow. It was no typical, non-summoning bird. Shino looked up and stood, letting others know that he was moving as Naruto slowly descended to the ground. They all followed his line of sight. Everyone gaped. Neji. Two the Junin appeared all around Naruto in swirls. As soon as he landed, everyone had the same thought. "That is really badass." Hinata, too, laughed. "Well, I'm sorry we're late, for you see, a robot attacked me on my way here, and I had to use my awesome skills as a Junin to defeat him, but I got hit by his exploding chickens of doom, and had to go to the hospital to get patched up by a medic nin," he said with a smile. Everyone's perspiration stopped alongside Madara. As Madara examined the new tablet in his hand, he noticed that the Rakudo Sennin was carving and writing on an increasing number of tablets. He thought dismissively, "It's almost like someone is forcing me to find them, but that's just ridiculous. I'm immune to genjutsu unless it comes from an Ain no Mangekyo Sharingan, Eternal Kaleidoscope Copy Wheel Eye." Insert snicker here. He picked up the enormous tablet and carried it to Pain. Maybe it was related to the Wrath of the Elements, as it had been called. He discovered that Pain had pierced a new area of his body, somewhere in the middle as well as on his lower body. Madara kept saying to himself, "I don't want to know, I don't want to know." All he did was toss the tablet at Pain, who rushed to seize it. Regretfully, he tore the piercing from his body. Regarding the Tsuchikage, when he heard the scream of all screams, the little, elderly, wrinkled, and faintly odorous man looked up. That was the cry of a man who had something unmentionable done to his unmentionables, and he winced in sympathy. With the heebie-jeebies, he declared, "Great, I'm gonna have nightmares tonight. Screw war, screw death, that is something that no man will get used to." Returning to Madara. At the time, Madara was squirming with pity for the Rinnegan user, but he would later look back on this moment with laughter. Currently, the Rinnegan user was sobbing on the ground and clutching his groin. Madara asked bluntly, "Well, what does the tablet say?" Pulling himself from his tears, Pain carefully snarled the text on the tablet. "He is the son and will be the one to announce the arrival of the others. His name is Ozai, and he will arrive on this planet in a fiery tail, bringing with him both power and devastation. His mother, the eternal mother of carnage, rage, and anger, is the next in line. She is known as the calamity of the sky, but the last, the father of chaos, the father of the great emptiness, the husband of the calamity of the sky, whose name is Zeno, will not arrive anytime soon. Eons will pass before he does. Beware of him. Beware of the harbinger of chaos, of the eternal void, of the end, for he is the god of such, and when he wills it, it will happen. He is the most powerful, so if the Jubi's prophecy were to come true, hope and pray that the chosen one will rise and defeat him, because the alternative is a fate worse than death." Madara and Pain exchanged glances, no longer joking around. Is this the reason why you are gathering the Biju Madara-sama, to help Naruto kill this Zeno? Pain responded. Madara's hand trembled in terror, but he nodded. His face didn't show it, but he was afraid of Zeno, the next thing that would appear. Pain appeared pale, as if he were about to vomit. Madara did not assign blame. Step up productions even more now. I don't care if we lose members, if we don't meet the deadline, then we're all screwed, Madara replied. Pain was only able to nod, so he hobbled off while clutching his groin to signal the others to move even faster. Getting Conan to heal his unmentionables first, though. The genin gazed incredulously at Kakashi's justification for his tardiness. Kiba asked with a deadpan expression, could you, come up with a better excuse, at least? Then Kakashi returned to his Icha book and said, you say something? Each woman gave him a savage glare, wanting to tear the book to pieces with the exception of Anko, who was aware that she would be killed if she attempted to remove the Icha from Kakashi, like the last sap a fool. Like sticking a sharp stick in the side of a 500-pound bear. Simply put, if you value your life, you don't do it. Kurenai was aware of this, but what else could she say? It was just smut. Few people can defeat Kakashi, who was comparable to Jiraiya in his heyday. As Naruto himself snorted with laughter, only the cage and superhuman Jinchuriki showed up. There were benefits to being descended from a psychopath who sought to wipe out humanity. It was pretty amazing that he had latent Mako in his genes, which allowed him to keep up with the strongest and fastest ninja. In particular, the prolonged endurance that wasn't limited to the battlefield. He had other uses for it. He pulled out his book, Loveless, and laughed. He began to read, listening regardless of what was going on. Normally, your teams would go through an exam given by your Junin sensei, but considering that Hiruzen-sama thought it prudent to pass you anyway, from not only your parents, but because of your untapped potential that he saw in each and every one of you, added Anko. The man's name made everyone shudder. Kurenai continued, for her, yes, we will all be training under each other. I am a genjutsu expert. Kakashi is a ninjutsu genius. Guy is the best taijutsu teacher in the world, on par with Hyuga Hiyashi, and Anko is the best interrogation nin there is, on par with Konoha's untouchable soul, Morino Ibiki. Anko, too, Kakashi continued, for Kurenai. Asuma was chosen to be one of the 12 guardians of the Fire Daimyo, and is an elemental affinity expert. Naruto, well, he's the son of the Yondaime Hokage. If that wasn't enough, he's also the son of Uzumaki Kushina, one of the world's top kunoichi. He's a literal monster on the battlefield. Stamina off the charts. Chakra is limitless. Plus is a genius when he thinks it's important. Other than that, he just ignores you. He also happens to be a kenjutsu master. Everyone nodded, and it was widely believed that Naruto never experienced chakra exhaustion or fatigue. He was the epitome of endurance, so it was normal. A few more of the obscene women flushed. The kenjutsu thing, however, was novel. Naruto laughed once more. Tenten was spotted by Naruto looking admiringly at Kurenai, and he returned her wink. When she looked at him, he made her flush. Hinata was staring at Tenten with a Byakugan glare. Even as the teams divided into smaller groups, he just read his book. He turned to his team and closed the book. In front of him stood Ino, Sakura, and Hinata. All of them solemn. The SSS screamed for him to move just as he was about to issue a physical activity. Naruto disappeared. He dodged a buttload of shuriken while moving so quickly and tossing the three girls to the opposing teams. The Junin barely caught the three girls as they crashed into each other. Concurrently, Naruto summoned the Shodai no Tsurugi and rolled to his feet. The sun shone on its sharp edge or edges, wearing what looked to be Konoha Anbu gear, but with minor variations. Over 24 nin emerged from the woodworks. For example, their masks featured the Iwagakeru symbol, and their armor was beige rather than white. At the rear of the group were two men, one of whom was red-headed and carried an odd sword. Naruto's pupils widened into slits at the sight of the other, a tall brunette with a straight sword by his side and a zanbatu on his back. He said to the Anbu, I was wondering when you would come. Did you get lost? They had no feeling. After spreading his fingers and raising his hand, the redhead struck forward like a multi-pronged poke. The platoon of Anbu charged ahead. When Naruto turned to face the other Junin, the message was obvious. Keep the genin safe. As if he had been practicing kenjutsu since childhood, Naruto came like a bat out of hell, swinging his blade with such precision and skill. When a wakizashi-wielding shinobi approached him from the sky, he sidestepped and chopped his head off. Naruto was not touched by blood. After removing the Tsurugi's sword, Naruto assumed the Ni-Ryujiri stance. The red mist never touched Naruto as he swiftly somersaulted over the horde of kunai that had been headed to his back. After he clashed with a kunoichi that swung a naginata, he swiftly ripped to said her and tore open her chest. They struck the kunoichi's body with a thud. The sword he had removed from the Tsurugi was thrown by him, and it made contact with the kunai flinger's forehead. Alongside the Junin and Genin. The Genin looked on in disgust, wonder, reverence, and sorrow. They were observing what Shinobi Dom really meant. Is that even a word? I dunno. Bile threatened to rise from Sakura's throat, and she could hardly control it. She would feel overwhelmed by the amount of blood, according to her father, who had described this as what it was like to be a kunoichi. Sakura covered her mouth with her hand and trembled. It appears that Karma was a bitch because she didn't take his words seriously. When Ino saw the steel flashing and the blood spraying, she was even more terrified and started crying. When she graduated, her father sat her down and had a serious conversation about life as a shinobi. She just shrugged it off after he'd left, leaving out the other ear while pretending to be serious. Like all teenagers do, she wished now she had not paid attention. Shikamaru and Choji watched. Their fathers had sat them down and spoken to them as well, and it had been the same, with the exception that they both gave it half attention. Shikamaru said, "Horrible." Choji nodded and instantly agreed. Choji glanced at the Junin around them and, in a moment of clarity that his clan was rumored to experience under pressure, realized why they might be abducted and used as brood mares. So it would be disastrous if the Iwa Nin used them as hostages against Naruto. The Junin were so confident and authoritative after seeing Naruto's look that they obeyed without question. Choji shook his head and said, "Naruto, what have you become?" Even though he was the first to acknowledge that he wasn't on a Junin's level, Kiba was shaken with rage after seeing the look Naruto had sent to the Junin. How much more will Naruto have to go alone? A lone alpha without a pack? He thought with repressed anger and sadness. The Inuzuka never liked that Naruto had no family. It occasionally pushed his mother, in particular, to a subdued rage that was more lethal than yelling rage. But he only glared at the ground after realizing why the Junin had stayed back. They were liability fearful. Hinata watched as her crush severed the head of a shinobi with a wakizashi. She needed the Junin's protection because she was afraid, not for her life, because her life was meaningless. No, her fear was for Naruto. He killed the kunoichi and shinobi so easily, so calmly, and without feeling. Naruto-kun, how many lives can you take before you start to change for the worse? She pondered grimly. Sasuke gave a scowl. Naruto could defeat any foe with one hand, so he didn't need protection from these nin. Well, perhaps. How in the world did you become so powerful? I am furious, he thought in a flash of insight. He recognized the expression Naruto gave the Junin with horror. He uttered, he's willing to sacrifice himself for us. Not even his mother had been prepared to give up anything for him. Kakashi gave a single nod while Sharingan out and observing the fight with fear and anxiety. Angrily, he stated, it wouldn't be the first time he has. Shino just gave a nod. Although he knew he was out of league and would only cause trouble, he felt compelled to assist Naruto and work with him to defeat the enemy shinobi. The assembled Junin clenched their jaws in rage. How much longer must Naruto put up with the loneliness that was meant to go away when he was working in a team? They were unable to assist him. Even now their ki significantly increased, attracting the attention of the brunette and the redhead, who are an emotionless couple. The brunette had an expression of indifference on his face, and the redhead smirked. Returning to Naruto. Just in time to stop a few shinobi from slashing their swords, Naruto ripped his sword from the kunai thrower's forehead. He casually crushed their skulls in with the flat end of his swords, bringing them to a quick end. Swords were broken, shuriken were deflected, jutsu were thrown, kunai were hurled, and lives were lost. Naruto was completely unconcerned. The dust eventually settled after one of the kunoichi at the rear of the platoon threw it into the air with a stray Doden jutsu. Dispelling his Shodai no Tsurugi, Naruto called forth Masamune. He moved in the direction of the two remaining Iwa Nin. At Training Ground 7, the two had traveled alongside a small hill close to the river. Given that the object was easily as tall as the Hokage Tower and had two arms extending out of the cliff face in the shape of a ramhand seal, small was a little dismissive. Some shinobi created the artwork, but they never got around to finishing it. As it turned out, the Training Ground's river came from a nearby waterfall. Naruto emerged in front of the two shinobi who had landed on the peak. In an attempt to assist, the Junin and Genin accompanied Naruto, but as they got closer to the top of the hill, they turned around to find 6 shinobi prepared to sacrifice themselves for their cause. Guy and Kakashi gladly complied. The Genin and Junin went to the top, which was flat and enormous. Now that they were safe, evidently, the shinobi wanted to make the head of the shinobi figure he was creating by placing a boulder here in the center. Observing the others, were Naruto and the two nin. Naruto gave them both a look. The brunette wore a tight, blue vest that exposed his muscular body, while the redhead wore a red trench coat with black leather shoulder pads. Both of them wore brown leather shoes and simple black pants, not very noteworthy if it weren't for their formidable swords. While reading something, the red-headed person made fun of Naruto by suggesting that he wasn't worthy of his attention. The red-haired person was reading aloud. Infinite in mystery is the gift of the goddess, we seek it thus, and take to the sky ripples form, on the water's surface. The wandering soul knows no rest. The brunette warned the red-headed person, do not take Namikaze Naruto lightly. After putting his book away, the red-headed man had drawn his sword. He snorted, noted, both of them sped toward Naruto, but Naruto was prepared. Alongside the Junin, they marveled as the swords clashed, the two nin cooperating, but it was in vain. Naruto was faster and more skilled than them. However, given that he was swinging a straight sword and his zanbadu, the brunette appeared to be on par with strength. Naruto just threw the brunette and redhead back with a wild slash, and they stood gasping. All hail Namikaze, huh? The brunette had inquired. The redhead said, Angel, back off, I'll take Naruto alone. Genesis was his startled response. Genesis ran a hand down the flat of his blade, igniting it with plasma energy, and uttered the words, the world needs a new hero. Naruto scowled. These were unfamiliar names that were difficult to pronounce. It's almost as if there were no names like those in the elemental countries. Naruto's gaze jerked to their blades. He noticed a distinct aura emanating from the swords. As he blinked, it was entering their bodies, altering their genetic composition and thought processes. Naruto thought, so, the swords are forcing the wielders into different people, huh? And if my suspicion is right, it was former sword wielders. Come and try, he answered Genesis by saying. So smug, but for how long, frowned Genesis. They rushed ahead and collided in the center. The brunette received no attention. Alongside the Junin, when he made an over-the-head chop and Naruto blocked it, they could see that whatever this Genesis did to his sword had given him 10 times more strength. A crater had developed around Naruto. As a result, Naruto gave Genesis a laugh. Genesis gave a backward snort. The Junin's focus was broken by a scream, and when they turned around, they saw Hinata holding a sword that had been thrown from Angel protruding from her stomach. When Naruto noticed, he kicked Genesis out alongside Hinata. Everyone tried to stop the blood from her wound when Hinata coughed up blood, but she knew none of them could perform medical ninjutsu to help her. Everyone was pushed away by Naruto when he showed up. She grinned. She cherished his features for her final moments. Slowly, her vision began to deteriorate. The darkness began to encroach on the edges of her vision. Her last sound was a muttered, Kuraga. She plunged into the shadows alongside Naruto. As he completed the healing spell, he trembled with anger when the avatar portion of his spells covered elements. He had questioned Kyuubi about how he had accomplished that. It turns out that Naruto's and Kyuubi's chakras naturally blend because, ironically, Kyuubi's chakra was self-sustaining or healing. Naruto was able to use support spells like Cure and Protect thanks to it. Even after he persuaded Kyuubi to acknowledge the Bijuu's past, Naruto was still perplexed. The Jubi, which was created by a monster crashing into a defunct Mako reactor, was once the Biju altogether. Given this and the fact that Naruto's ancestry included Mako, it was inevitable that Naruto would eventually turn into a walking, talking materia, even though his avatar heritage temporarily aided his spells. A deep rage buried itself in Naruto's heart. He had received kindness, acceptance, and support from Hinata, who had never spoken negatively about him. His wing, which was entirely black in color, spread out from his back in a way. It was inspiring. The wing on his right shoulder blade flapped once as he stood up and launched himself into the air. He turned to face both Angel and Genesis, and the assembled shinobi gazed up in wonder. Angel appeared to be urinating on himself. Genesis, meanwhile, scowled at Angel. He said, you fucking idi, before the Nodashi abruptly punctured his right lung. In a shower of blood, Angel's head was severed from his shoulders. Angrily, Naruto gazed at the ground. He had caused harm to someone. His line of thought was correctly assumed by the Junin, who shook their heads in sorrow. Troublesome was mumbled. You can guess who said it 3 times. The first 2 are not included. With the sun shining on his face, Naruto raised his head. The wind blew the abandoned book of Genesis. The pages turned and then stopped, and his wing had reached as far as it could. Even if the morrow is barren of promise, nothing shall forestall my return. Tenten had given Naruto some handy scrolls, which he had sealed with the corpses and Ningu in order to cover her modesty. He removed his trench coat and placed it over Hinata's ripped jacket, which had been torn by the straight sword that had been thrown. At this point, he was completely nude. Once he had sealed the corpses, his wing had vanished. He turned to Junin, who was saddened, and Genin, who was a little alarmed and panicked. He glanced at Ino, who flushed, and said, Genin, I don't think I need to tell you to shut your mouths when it comes to what happened here. She intended to inform her parents of the incident. Next time we meet, come this training ground again, where the Junin will proceed to lead you to my mansion. My training ground is more secure and has better facilities like a medical bay. We will meet in 2 days. Dismissed. he stated with certainty. For a minute, the genin stopped to gaze at him, and Hinata, Sakura, Tenten, and Ino actually stopped to stare at him. After that, they all flew home. Can you guys? Naruto turned to the Junin, but Kakashi interrupted him. At the end, Kakashi winced. We will report to Hokage-sama. You take Hinata to the hospital. I'm sure her father will pick her up. He might be able to defeat a furious Hiashi, but it would probably be very expensive. R2 Asuma questioned, what is up with that wing? Naruto grinned and said, classified. Asuma simply let out a sigh. In any case, I probably don't want to know. Naruto gave a nod. Kurenai and Enko gave him anxious glances, their eager faces hardly contained. He has a lot of muscle, Kurenai thought in Enko's mind. The phrase, drip, 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 kept repeating. A nosebleed had afflicted her inner self. Guy gave him a melancholy smile with assurance. He said, don't worry, Naruto-kun, next time, when they come after you, we will help. Naruto laughed in a somewhat casual manner. He said, up to you, I suppose. In a whirl of black feathers, he vanished. The Junin just gazed at the spiral of black feathers that led to the frigid ground. When Kakashi said, this situation is so, Asuma was interrupted. Troublesome? He questioned sarcastically. Kakashi gave him a fierce look. Using the genin. They had met at an undisclosed place rather than at home. A man entered the flower shop and said, hello, can I get? But stopped when he noticed the 12 nin glaring at him. The door jingled. He just backed out slowly, laughing. Tenten's kunai sank into the doorframe, missing too late. Okay. What the hell happened back there? Lee asked, showing signs of impatience and anger. His response even startled Neji. Well, from what I can gather, said Shikamaru. They were assassins sent from Iwagakeru. They were after Naruto. It makes sense. Him being his father's son, he concluded. Lee realized all of a sudden, I see, because Naruto is Minato Dono's son, Iwa felt compelled to assassinate him because of Minato Dono's actions during the Third Great Ninja War. Neji replied, Minato-sama was said to have wiped out an army of shinobi using his signature technique. Hiraishin no Jutsu, the Flying Thunder God technique, allowed him to instantly appear anywhere. The mere idea of such power made Sakura shudder. Sasuke tightened his jaw when he saw the expression Naruto gave the Junin. He didn't like the feeling he got. Ino's face was shaken as she said, the Flying Thunder God technique, what a terrifying technique, able to wipe out entire armies in a single go. Sighing. The Flying Thunder God technique wasn't the only technique Yondaime-sama made. That technique coupled with his Rasengan made short work of even cage-level nin that were able to destroy entire villages, he continued. Tenten gave a nod. The Flying Thunder God technique uses a special three-pronged kunai as a focus point. When he threw one, it was easy to anticipate where he would appear, but when he threw over 1,000, you were guaranteed to die. Shoji added what his father had once told him. It is said that the kunai has a very complex seal sequence hidden within a sealing matrix. This was a mixture of Fuin, Nin and even Genjutsu come together. The nickname Kiroi Senku came from the fact that he would appear in a yellow flash of light. This blinded the shinobi that saw him execute the technique, effectively safeguarding the technique by people that wished to steal the technique. Before long, everyone was talking about Naruto's wing. Ino said, it was pretty badass. Recalling him standing with his wing out, she flushed. He resembled an angel who had fallen. Sakura just nodded, blushing. Her inner self, who had insisted that they rip off his pants and perform the horizontal hula, mentally kicked her around the house. As she recalled him using the Nodashi, Tenten licked her lips, remembering his grace, strength, and majesty in a short period of time never seen since the Rakudo Sennin. He was a genius. The irony was stinging at times. Everyone began talking more in depth about the wing. Some made an effort to formulate theories. Maybe it's a bloodline limit from his mother or something, Tenten replied. Maybe he invented a technique that gave him the wing, replied Shoji. Maybe he's an angel sent by Kami to watch over us since the Kyuubi's attack, Lee yelled. He was struck on the head by Neji several times. The hammer the head of that had enhancing seals. They quarreled until Inoichi, who appeared to have lost a lot of sleep, came downstairs. I don't care what you're talking about, I don't care who you are, but by 3 everyone will get out of here. 1, he screamed. The fact that the others knew Shunshin was unknown to Ino. She felt a little envious. She turned to face her dad. She said as sweetly as she could, hi daddy. Which was pretty damn cute, by the way. Inoichi just indicated the location of her bedroom. She gave a terrified nod and rushed to her bed, exhausted from the day's activities. He swore and said, bloody kids. He glanced at a timepiece. Not even 5 o'clock had arrived. Having worked the night shift protecting the Hokage, he snarled before going back to sleep. Alongside the Hokage, Hiruzen asked sharply, how many were there? More than 24, sir. I couldn't get a proper count because of some of the technique they utilized, such as Doden, Doryuheki and Doden, Doryuenden no Jutsu. Kakashi replied with seriousness, he cannot see through solid stone, not even with his Sharingan, not his Sharingan, anyway. Hiruzen gave a nod and continued, make sure to follow Naruto's idea and lead them to his mansion. I'm sure he will include all of you, including the genin in the security seals and ID seals that protects his mansion. However, here his voice became cold. Next time, help him. Even just 2 Junin could have protected the genin enough to rid of the disadvantage of hostages. Every Junin winced when Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto sends you the look, try saying that. But the look, Kakashi stammered. They received the evil eye from Hiruzen. It was the look's older brother. After bowing, Kakashi bounded out of dodge and so did the other Junin. Hiruzen let out a sigh. He had to acclimate Naruto to the fact that there were people there to assist him, not undermine him, not betray him, but to genuinely assist him in dealing with his adversaries. He didn't have to be by himself, he didn't. How terrible is wisdom, when it brings no profit to the wise? Hiruzen sadistically questioned his clan guard and himself. His response was one of quiet, interrupted only by the sounds of children laughing outside. He pivoted and gazed out towards his village. He observed how the kids interacted with one another. Naruto was denied something, denied his early years. He would never understand what it's like to play bull rush, hide and seek, tag, or pass. He tried to stop it, but one tear escaped. Oh Naruto, you are the hero this village will never know. Alongside Naruto, Naruto observed as the medic Nin diagnosed Hinata, who was lying on a bed in the hospital's upper floors. He observed from a distance. Although he was certain she would survive, he didn't want her to die before she had fully lived because of a stray poison, infection, or other absurd but equally dangerous circumstance. He nearly recoiled as Hyuga Hiyashi blasted the door off its hinges. Nearly Hiyashi glared at the medics to hurry up and check on his daughter, accusing him of failing to protect her. However, he softened his gaze when he turned to face his daughter. He didn't despise her despite being a distant, heartless, and occasionally even cruel parent. He truly did love Hinata. However, he occasionally sees his wife. When he sees her, he recognizes his brother. He sees his mom. And he feels embarrassed, ashamed of the way he has so far led his clan. Naruto simply gazed at Hiyashi with a sort of reverence, not silent, though. She will be fine. I healed her myself, and only brought her here because I thought she might have caught something from the blade, or something else that seemed unlikely, but had a chance of happening, he replied cheerfully. For his trouble, he received the evil eye. Naruto gave a hearty laugh. Alongside Neji. Neji grimaced as he removed the splinters from his face with the tweezers. When he had told Hiyashi-sama about his daughter's hospitalization and near death, his lovely face had been ruined. When it collided with the dojo floor, his voice was angry as he muttered, that was so not worth it. Then something occurred to him. If Hiyashi discovered, he would discover that Neji had kept it from him. He gave a violent shudder. It was difficult for him to say, I didn't want splinters in my face, due to the fact that he would have received a juken to the balls. Pulling a particularly large splinter out of his lip, Neji winced. After a while, he muttered, maybe it was worth it. He was in his room with his obsession all around him. Few people were aware that Neji was completely smitten with anything adorable, particularly kittens. Once, following a training session, Hinata discovered this when she assisted him to his bed. In fact, she teased him in response. Hinata is making fun of him. He petted the adorable kitten plush toy he had on his bed absently while shaking his head. Neko-chan, she didn't mean it, he thought defensively. Did his plush kitten purr, or was that just in his head? In any case, it's not as though he is the only one with an obsession that goes against the village's stereotyped behavior. Choji, for instance, enjoys going for a morning run despite his bulk suggesting otherwise in order to use his clan Hijutsu secret technique. He simply kept the fat on with chips. Even though it was funny, Lee enjoyed reading fashion magazines. He only wore green spandex and orange arm and leg warmers during training or missions, which made it amusing. In fact, Shikamaru would rise at 6 in the morning to watch this one show on TV that he enjoyed. Survivor was the name of it. It seems to be a fairly strategic game. In fact, Tenten enjoyed performing tea ceremonies for visitors. However, if Lee and Neji ever told, she threatened to castrate them. She was wearing a kimono. Of all things, when they had passed her house, it was widely believed that she was surrounded by testosterone. They were enlightened to see her wearing a kimono and pouring tea. Ironically, Kiba enjoyed cats. His mother wanted to give him a slap. He simply respected larger cats, such as tigers and lions, before she realized that she gave a nod herself in order to breed the clan dogs. She wished they had wolves. However, only Akamaru and Kuromaru were wolves thus far. and only partially they would be a formidable force if their dogs were as large as tigers or lions. In any case, they are already feared. In addition to enjoying reading, Ino is quite informed about biological topics like poisons and plants. Given that her parents ran a flower shop, that wasn't all that shocking. In actuality, Sakura had genuine interest in Ijutsu. Her grandmother, a former medic nin, and Tsunade were her idols. This ran counter to her fervent and occasionally aggressive actions, Sasuke excluded, which was rapidly fading. Sasuke's ego was boosted by his genuine fondness for his fangirls. In any case, he believes that he had more fangirls than Itachi. It's his method of exacting revenge on Itachi. In a sick, twisted, completely insane, unfunny, and insignificant way. He eventually experienced more problems and eardrum ruptures as a result of his increased fangirl count. Even Shino enjoyed listening to opera music. It seemed to help him focus and cope with prejudice regarding his clan techniques and the fact that Kikai inhabited his body. Neji just let out another sigh, sustaining the final splinter. Looking at his scarred skin in the mirror, he exclaimed, "Fucking Naruto, fucking sword, fucking fuck." He continued to curse. Someone shouted, "Oi, keep it down in there," at random. Hyuga. He answered, "Oh, go to hell, Yuru." Hanabi simply palmed her face as she passed Neji's door. Calmly handled her quickly developing ass with Hinata and Naruto. He had persuaded Hiyashi to sit down and relax, though it had taken some work. Naturally, for Hiyashi's benefit, "Seeing as you are here to look after your daughter, I must go and report my findings to the Hokage, and prepare my mansion, which will be acting as the base for the Rookie 12 and the Junin. My mansion is more secure, so you do not have to worry about security anymore, Hyuga-san," he concluded. Before Hiyashi could respond, he vanished. According to Hiyashi, fucking Namikaze. Now, he wasn't sure if that marriage contract was really a smart idea. Perhaps he ought to let his daughter make her own decisions. He gave a nod. He no longer wanted to coerce her. Alongside Shikamaru, he watched with a sigh as his father and mother quarreled over something. They were no longer together. Nothing like a divorce occurred between them. Simply became so irritated that Shikaku glared at him and Yoshino fought with his fist. He just lay on the grass in the backyard and gazed up at the sky, where clouds were gathering into a storm. He let out another sigh like the clouds. He wished he was free, away from his problematic father, problematic mother, and problematic team. He desired liberty. Tisk, Mendokuso, alongside Naruto, to report his findings and retrieve the scroll for Hiruzen's scrutiny. Naruto had dispatched AKB to the Hokage. Hiruzen would receive advice from his clone regarding the swords and their ability to transform their wielders. Kyuubi had given him the details about Angeal and Genesis and was taken aback. It appeared that they had engaged in a rather epic battle with his ancestor, Sephiroth. However, it appeared that the two Naruto battled had retained some aspects of their original personalities. For example, when Angeal threw the sword at Hinata, he was being a jerk. Additionally, Angeal is more likely to curse at his partner. Naruto let out a sigh. It was unclear how their weapons ended up in Iwagakaru's hands. He was nonetheless unnerved by it. His teeth twitched at the discovery of all these old and potent weapons. He had to find someone to share his weapons with the others apart from Shodai no Tsurugi and his Masamune. To come up with someone to give the weapons to, he created a clone. He had to learn how to bend the elements on his own right now rather than exploring his Sephiroth ancestry. As he considered the turning of the weapons, he had reached his mansion. He had therefore proceeded directly to the training field. His mind flashed pictures of the training he needed to do. Kyuubi had forwarded it to him. With some hesitation, he said, "So, Dance of the Dragon, huh?" It sounded so cheesy and uninteresting. With a sigh, he simply positioned himself alongside one of his clones. And they danced together. From his extended limbs, flames jumped, starting a lovely dance. Naruto finished swiftly, his fists meeting those of his clone. He got up and called forth more clones. "Thank you to whoever came up with the KB. Kami really. Having Kami up in heaven." As she watched Naruto thank her for whoever invented KB, she glanced down at her TV. No one dared to look at her because she was so beautiful. Her eyes were like the sky, and her hair was like sunlight. She has silky, satin skin but silky soft. She had a more voluptuous figure than any woman. Nonetheless, her face possessed timeless wisdom and power. She just gave the TV a smile in a somewhat cheerful tone. She said, "You're welcome, Naruto-sama." She noticed a KB of herself completing her paperwork to her left before nodding to herself once more. She occasionally questioned why she created paperwork. The economy and the universe as a whole were supported by small jobs like paperwork, and small jobs needed small people. However, Kami cannot simply let humans make decisions about the universe. How foolish that would be. Her clone returned her smile, returning to Naruto. "Thank you, Naruto-sama." Naruto glanced around and blinked. He mumbled to himself, "I could have sworn I heard something." He responded with a faint laugh that he could barely hear. He moaned, "Greater, I'm going insane." AKB threw a huge, flaming boulder at another KB he witnessed. He perspired at the devastation the attack had caused. Well, insane. He strolled alongside the training grounds pond. It was Kyubi who taught him how to bend water, and he thought of the book with the initials JL. Water is formless, shapeless. You put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can creep, it can ebb, it can flow, or it can crash, he murmured. Be water, my friend, press pull press. Pull press pull. Naruto observed how his movements caused the little pond to change. The remarks made by Kyubi guided his movements. He experimented with the movement, just as he did with his kenjutsu, but to be honest, they were at best ambiguous. All he wanted was to be able to change his style to include elemental attacks, perhaps employ it as a last resort, or after a period of kenjutsu practice, then abruptly summon his elements to confuse the adversary. In an attempt to create a wall of water in front of him, he was able to reach his waist, but no matter how hard he pushed, it refused to rise above his waist, which infuriated him. A particularly unpleasant memory of a clone struck him, and he winced. It had been sent to its diaphragm with a stone pillar. The force of the hit had nearly caused it to throw up its chakra-made guts. He created more and instructed them to practice his bending techniques. However, he kept working on water bending because he found it to be very soothing. When the water rose to his shoulders, he grinned, but when it faltered and then dropped, he scowled. He just let out a sigh. He thought to himself, it appears that the one art that will cause me problems will be bending. It was easier to use spells and practice taijutsu and kenjutsu than this. Not that Namikaze Uzumaki. Naruto disliked a challenge, shall we say. Of course, I wouldn't really mind either if everything was as simple as learning kenjutsu, he thought somewhat casually. I learned the hard way that you take what you can get. Naruto was unaware that teenagers were not supposed to think like this. It wasn't natural, of course, to have a god thrust a monstrous creature of malevolent chakra into your soul and keep it there. Not to mention that his ancestor or ancestors were strong forces that altered the course of history. Literally, Naruto was depressed for some reason. He was the one who had injured Hinata. That infuriated him. The few times Hinata spoke to him, she had always been kind. Every time she looked at him, a tiny smile had appeared on her face. She would always applaud him in silence, but not quietly enough. She was among the few individuals who prevented him from descending into madness and the void. But he's not sane in the first place. For her own sake, he did not want to date her. After learning that she had a crush on him in general, he was not welcome in Konoha, and he would be held accountable if they ever caused her harm. There would be no exceptions. Even though it was indirect, he wouldn't let someone who had supported him and been kind to him suffer. Other than being a sensei, he made the decision to go see her sometime. Now he wanted to know her better. Well, he thought, this fucking sucks. Who should be at his gate when he felt his seals activate? Why? Hiyashi Hyuga, of course, alongside Sarutobi. Sarutobi nodded to himself after glancing down at the scroll. He needs to get his straggling students to return. If he had the option, he would abandon himself and pull the brats back by their hair. He looked at a monkey messenger who hurried off to find Jiraiya and said, "You owe me too much, little Jiraiya." He wished Jiraiya had stayed to take care of Naruto, but he was too valuable and was essentially unaware of the shinobi's movements without him. Yes, he had other spy masters, but they were primarily employed to monitor the area around home. None of them were skilled enough to sneak into a secret village. With the exception of Jiraiya, the self-described Pimp Sama. Of course, the fact that he received some for being a Sanin was rather pitiful. After pausing, Sarutobi palmed his face. He nearly snarled, "You shrunk off your duties as well. Tsunade, time to repay your debt." If Jiraiya was unable to watch over Naruto in the hospital, the little brat was supposed to return. Hiruzen was enraged by the entire circumstance. He pounded his fist into the dense wood, and his desk burst into splinters. "Go. Find her. If she doesn't come back, tell me, and I will retrieve her personally," he replied icily. After bowing, the monkey vanished. He ordered, "Someone get me a new fucking desk now." They all chose Shikaku to go get it and deliver it to Hiruzen himself. After the current Anbu guard gulped. "Tisk. Fuck." Alongside Naruto, he said icily, "Indeed, Hyuga-san." Hiyashi winced. He started to say, but Naruto interrupted him. Angrily, he said, "Hiyashi, shut up. Not only did I become a Jinchuriki unwillingly, but also I became a married man to someone I might not have even liked," he said quietly. There was something about Naruto's speech that made Hiyashi shudder. "I will not marry for anything other than love, but I don't think that will happen anytime soon. The only girls to really show interest for me is Anko and your daughter, and I really mean interest, not my heritage, not my skills, not even my looks, but for me as a person. To me, that means the world and more, Hiyashi-san." He spoke with even tone. If she wants to pursue a relationship with me, so be it, but I will not marry her unless I love her, he said at last. Hiyashi gave one nod that was the conclusion of that. Naruto snarled, "Get the fuck out." As the man left, Naruto watched furiously. He was really annoyed by this. Was free will a meaningless concept? Was everything, including his marriage, to be predetermined for him? He was aware of Hinata's crush, and he thought she was adorable and pleasant, albeit a little reserved. However, she would need to get to know him for himself, not based on her opinions of his character. If she wanted him in the same way that he is trapped by the stigma of the Jinchuriki, he didn't want her to feel compelled into it. Naruto sat at his dining table with his elbows resting on his knees. After that, he covered his face with his hands. He remarked cynically, "It's just one thing after another." Then he began to laugh, the chuckle resonating with bitterness. However, it quickly vanished, a nearly despairing expression covering his face. There was a defamatory silence in the room alongside Hinata. She had the impression that she was resting on the world's softest mattress. It was the best feeling she had ever experienced when she opened her eyes to find herself in a hospital bed. Her mind went into overdrive. Her gaze shifted to the white ceiling. It was the day after the assassination, as the sun was just rising when she looked out the window. Recalling the events involving Naruto and those assassins, she let out a sigh. What took place? Is he okay? Was there anyone else hurt? Before she could go back to sleep, she whispered the boy's name, no one she looked up to. Naruto-kun. Hiyashi tensed at his daughter's breathy murmur. He swore and said, "Ah, shit," with that. He had just messed himself up. This meant something to him. He said, "God, Hana-chan, what would you do?" to the nearly empty hallway. Hinata seemed to be mocked by the machine's answering beep, which was used to track his heart rate. Alongside Naruto. Naruto got out of bed and yawned. It was a new day. Unexpectedly, his emotional reserves had been depleted by his black mood from the previous day. He hardly ever allowed his feelings to control him, at least his true feelings. From an early age, he had learned to keep his feelings of fear, hate, and sadness to himself, especially from the Hokage. However, he would only work on sending a KB to his Junin friends regarding tomorrow's training today, after which he would take the day off. He would really like to hear his fathers and mothers singing on those CDs. It seems that Jiraiya and the Sandame were the only ones who had heard them sing. Even if they weren't speaking to him, he still wanted to hear their voices expressing their love for him. He gave himself a shake. "Don't break now, please." He sighed and gave his temples a light rub. He was in dire need of a soak in the onsen at the moment. After calling the KB to deliver the message, he proceeded to his onsen, which was close to his bathing area. In addition to a filter and other such devices, there was a huge pool of hot running water to keep it clean. There are self-washing benches and a variety of cleaning supplies, ranging from the strongest soap to shampoos in every scent. Getting the good stuff for the blood was sometimes a requirement of being a shinobi. The mahogany walls were made of wood and had seals applied to protect them from moisture and potential damage. It featured a special glass ceiling near the changing rooms that could fog over when a switch was pressed. It seems that this was intended to be a bath for both sexes. As he slid into the water, Naruto grinned languidly. A brief sigh of satisfaction interrupted the smile, but it returned quickly. He eased up and let his cold, clammy muscles relax and warm up. He recognized his own chakra signature as he heard footsteps approaching his bath. He was right when he reasoned that the clone he had sent to the Junin must have created another clone. After all, he was aware of himself. The clone entered carrying a tiny stereo with earphones attached to the bottom. On the other hand, the clones had a CD box. After looking up, Naruto placed the items on a unique floating wooden tray that some onsen owners used to serve drinks. He fitted the earphones and placed a CD in the tiny stereo. He heard his mother's lovely voice and let out a happy sigh. He fell asleep to the sound that had eluded him for the majority of his childhood. The world didn't seem so horrible all of a sudden. After 30 minutes, he was aware that he shouldn't have spoken. Naruto complained as he sensed some familiar chakra signatures approaching his front door. They were permitted entry through the gate since they had been keyed into the guarding seals. However, nobody could open his front door or break it down. In any case, he needed to get up. He thought somewhat casually, or maybe not, "I'm such a genius I scare myself sometimes." To deal with the situation, he made a KBKBs were excellent for almost anything. Even Naruto gave a little cough. Perhaps later, he thought. Perhaps after telling them where he was and even inviting them to soak, the clone dispelled itself. The clone's day had been brightened by the flushed silence that followed Naruto's day. Let's not say he didn't enjoy a good practical joke now and then, but when he remembered who was at his front door, he sighed. Sakura, Kurenai, Anko, Kakashi, and 3 individuals he had never met before. He palmed his face as a result. He complained, "Me and my big mouth, Fuck you Murphy, fuck you. Jiraiya walked with Tsunade and Shizune, having realized that they were in deep doo-doo. The three of them were walking in silence. Not Shizune, though, as she was too good-hearted to be upset with. She made an effort to calm the two Sannin, but both were aware of what was about to happen. They had dismissed their responsibilities as human beings, and as godparents it was a self-fulfilling prophecy to abandon a helpless orphan in a chilly shinobi world. It was incredibly cruel. Fortunately, Naruto's persistence was not taken into consideration. They could both agree that he was a strong person over the years. They had talked about what Hiruzen had told them in letters. He had to grow up tough, very tough, to handle his emotions, and his life lesser men would have broken under the weight of the oppression. Instead he thrived, strove to show them who he really is, and that is what I am afraid of. Who is Namikaze Naruto? Jiraiya said with regret. What was he supposed to do? Give up his spy network to care for his godson? That isn't how it should or could operate. He had heard tales of a particular group attempting to kill Naruto because of his biju. Irony can be a cruel mistress. Murphy was her spouse. Naturally, he was unaware that they were pursuing Naruto to defend him and assist him in his battle with Zeno, since only Madara and Pain were aware of the Akatsuki's actual goal. Jiraiya was forced to carry on working in the hopes that it would shield him from foreign adversaries when the hosts began to perish following the unsealing process, and the Akatsuki's overall plan was essentially non-existent. Unfortunately, Hiruzen was only able to repel the domestic enemies. Tsunade regarded the Hokage monument, which was plainly visible, with a gloomy frown. They were going to arrive at the village that stole everything from her in no time. She lost Dan and Nawaki as a result. He was cornered sometimes, and was beaten, but more often than not the attackers would end up in the hospital with him. He was very quick for a little brat, being able to cut hamstrings with a kunai he had scrounged up from somewhere. I can't imagine his mental state right now. Not only would lesser men break, but any man. Thankfully he was only beat rarely. The people that hate him soon learned that you can't corner him without losing something. A limb. Maybe those that did survive were not only executed by sensei, but by Anbu and most of the nin populace, she grumbled. A decent bottle of alcohol was what she needed. How their teacher will react to them both is a mystery only the gods know. She was not immune to her teacher, despite the fact that she had witnessed her boyfriend's death, healed the most terrible thing a human being can do to another, and marched through battlegrounds. Even though it was a respectful fear, she still feared him. This man was Kami no Shinobi, the same title as the legendary Rakudo Sennin. He could beat the living daylights out of her and make it seem as simple as writing. Hell, for the sake of irony, he could probably do it with a pen as well. She shuddered. Jiraiya nodded, instantly understanding her shiver. At last, she had acknowledged that she had fantasized about them together. She gave him a fierce look that could have melted Guy's genjutsu. Tsunade was able to read his twisted thoughts almost before they occurred. Shizune shook her head slowly as she watched the two of them act like fools. She whispered to the pig in her arms, "They must be more afraid than they care to admit." There was something almost sarcastic about the pig's response. Snort. Alongside Hiruzen. As the Anbu guard gradually reorganized his papers and new desk, Hiruzen gazed icily at Konoha. There was plenty of sake and a stash of a certain book on the desk. Without a doubt, the meeting with his students would go badly, and he would need to relax afterward, or he might do something he would enjoy but later regret. He thanked Shikaku in his head for the foresight. Similar to setting the Hokage tower on fire or murdering teammates, or setting his documents on fire, or simply burning objects. He walked slowly to his chair, letting out a sigh at the north gate. He sensed his students' burning chakra. Realizing that they didn't feel the need to conceal their chakra in Konoha made him twitch. When he realized why, he sat down in a chilly rage. The idiots were beginning to make mistakes, but he hesitated. He couldn't really judge because he had made a mistake too. However, he was also the Hokage. The expression on Hiruzen's face made the Anbu guard, who was hiding in plain sight, gulp. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't shove a rusty kunai in your nostril," was the expression displayed. The grandfather's expression didn't look good indeed. He was kind, but he had very little tolerance for some things, like his two students who decided it would be wise to arrive here gradually. He spoke softly, his fingers in a steeple. "Fetch me my students." The Anbu let out a sigh upon realizing something. Two Sannin were supposed to be dragged back. Shikaku remarked. "Tisk, this is your fault, Sume." Actually, it wasn't, but she had persuaded him to work this specific shift so she wouldn't have to put up with Shuza, whose meaty smell diverted her partner. Furthermore, they couldn't afford to be sidetracked. Her response was, "Fuck yourself," with the pupils. Jiraiya gawked at the Konoha women. There was something about them that made beauty seem almost essential after realizing that he was soaking up his prevying in case they died at the hands of their sensei. Tsunade wanted to punch the creep back to whatever hole he had crawled out of. She quickly produced a unique sake jug with special seals at the bottom that contained more sake than the container permitted. Shizune was busy eating the squid she had just purchased on a stick while observing the two perverts and intoxicated people. At least in public alongside Kakashi. He was drawn to the two Sanin and continued to read his book. He had chosen to go meet the two after doing some grocery shopping in a store. Jiraiya gave him a proud look, and the women gave the book two savage glares. A rather pleased Jiraiya inquired, "Well, if it isn't little Kakashi, how are you?" The response from Kakashi was, "Meh." Tsunade growled, "Kakashi." Suddenly, Kakashi remembered Tsunade's extreme anger before his book could be burned or torn. He quickly sealed it. A smug smile was on Tsunade's face. Did they not realize that pervertedness is what makes life good? Kakashi sighed. They must have occasionally had twisted thoughts. Tsunade snarled once more. She seemed to be able to read any twisted thought. Shizune held her pig and giggled. The Konoha residents appeared to be perspiring at the sight. An Anbu who had come from a nearby alley said, "Tsunade-sama, Jiraiya-sama, Shizune-san Hokage-sama has summoned you to his office." Jiraiya said, "Okay Shikaku, we'll go right away." After giving one nod, the Anbu vanished. Looking around at the current company, Jiraiya said sadly, "Well, let's go then." Tsunade felt uneasy about this encounter alongside Kakashi. The Hokage's yells and shouts made Kakashi wince as he stood outside the office. He rarely lost his temper like this. The yelling was louder than he had anticipated from the good-natured man. He was shouting about bananas, explosives, burning objects, paperwork, Naruto and his treatment. It was obvious the old man had gone insane as he read about Aoi's sensual message to Kimiko. He muttered, "With a job like that, I wouldn't be surprised." The ensuing giggle was incongruous with the background shouting that occurs when someone sticks a rusty kunai up someone's nose. Unfortunately, this was just another typical day, and the secretary didn't even glance up at the shouting. When he heard the Hokage order the two to introduce themselves to Naruto and explain the situation, Kakashi's perspiration stopped as she remembered what she had been told about Naruto's life. Shizune, who was staring at the book and appeared worried for her mentor, let out a sorrowful sigh. It wasn't a pretty day. Kakashi and Shizune joined the two Sanin as they left, their faces showing fear. Sakura Haruno, who had been searching for someone who knew Naruto's residence, was making her way to the office when she heard the Hokage yelling. She knew she had found her mark. Sakura said, "Do you mind if I come with you, Kaka-sensei?" Kakashi was aware of the cause. She wanted to formally apologize and make amends because she felt bad about how she had treated Naruto. It had nothing to do with Naruto's coolness and good looks. Sincere Kakashi led them to the bottom floor while nodding absently. Sakura had smiled and then stared at Tsunade before Sakura introduced herself and expressed her admiration for Ijutsu. Tsunade had only raised an eyebrow at that. Tsunade grinned for the first time. Someone was interested in her field. They left the tower and made their way to the Namikaze mansion. They were shocked to see Anko and Kurenai had already entered the gate, and they were even more shocked that they had not pretended to be caught in the act. This indicates that they visit us quite frequently. The females could hardly stand Jiraiya and Kakashi's giggles and didn't want to tear down the mansion's walls just yet. At the moment, Naruto had dried off after exiting the enormous pool of warm water. After that, he wore a singlet and black sweatpants. His hair was beginning to obstruct his vision, so he had tied it up. He repeated himself, "I really need a haircut." The company was still flushed from what his clone had said. When he came down, he gestured for them to come into the kitchen. Dazed, they followed. As soon as he passed through the kitchen door, he created a clone, and they all helped to prepare food. Eager for the food they could already smell, they sat at the table. When he began to sing softly, his clone joined in. His singing captivated them as they stared. He placed the foot on the table where they were seated. He gazed at them expectantly. Sakura appeared sad when she said, "I know I've never been nice to you, Naruto, and I really don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm sorry for how I've treated you." Brief, straightforward, and direct, Naruto pondered. Her day was brightened by his smile and the three words, "You are forgiven." With tears in her eyes, she returned the smile. To be forgiven made her very happy. The man with the red tattoos and white hair cleared his throat. He smiled nervously and said, "This is Tsunade Kyo Ikangasotsu, and I'm Jiraiya no Gama-senin, and we are your godparents." Anko's mouth dropped open. Kurenai gave a gasp. Kakashi let his book fall. Sakura passed out. Naruto scowled. "What?" Naruto gazed at the two individuals before him. The others appeared to disappear into the distance. Two individuals who had deserted him to Konohagakaru no Sato were in front of him when he fell, when he cried, when he was lonely, and when he was hurt. Two people were supposed to be there. Chakra started to accumulate out of the deepest black. a wing appeared. A long Nodashi vanished into thin air with Tsunade and Jiraiya. When he said that one word, Jiraiya winced. It was painful to have it thrust in his face. Even though he was naturally perplexed, his thoughts were as obvious as if they had been inscribed on his forehead, and the agonized expression on his face was heartbreaking. For all these years, they had betrayed him, abandoned him, and left him alone. There was no metaphor for how painful it was at the word. Tsunade bit her lip. What was the word that broke her heart? It was delivered with such sadness, hatred, and bitterness that she was unable to control the tears that welled up in her eyes. She was certainly a seasoned shinobi, however. The voice's expression of pure sadness caught her off guard. His tone was one of accusation. Too much power, too much suffering. He felt his chakra rise. Jiraiya went pale more than his own. Did a wing of the darkest black emerge? Tsunade let out a gasp. An angel? A long Nodashi vanished into thin air. Shizune let out a sigh. They were both so lifeless. Tower of Hokage. Hiruzen was not particularly surprised to feel the chill of icy ice running down his spine. He sensed his two students' chakras waning a little. You shall see what your actions have cost you. I have already seen what mine has purchased within the boy, he grumbled. He was shocked to see how easily Naruto took lives the night they killed the shinobi so easily. So heartless. Hiruzen was to blame. Naruto was never able to have family or friends. He never even had the opportunity to make contact with humans. His only interactions were insults and beatings. He was never given the opportunity to grow to value human life. Because, well, how much does a demon value life? Alongside Naruto, his mind burned, churned, twisted, and raged. His mind was racing with ideas. Traitors. Demon. Go and do not return. I don't consider you family. Why don't you simply pass away? Where are you, father and mother? I feel so alone. He found himself in a state of half waking, half dreaming. He appeared to be dancing as his long Nodashi lifted with a certain grace. He said without emotion, Jiraiya, run hard and long, run my little rabbits. After barrel rolling through the front door and the kitchen door, Jiraiya opened it and left dodge. Tsunade appeared to have wet her underwear as she sat there. Do not worry, Tsunade, your punishment will come in due time, he continued to drone. She let out a whine. Horrible. This wing-wielding child threatening her, but she studied his eyes intently. The abyss returned the gaze. She shuddered once more. Naruto vanished alongside Jiraiya. Raise. Pump, raise, pump, raise, pump for all his worth, which is quite a bit. Jiraiya ran. His legs were pumping so quickly that the blur was invisible to the naked eye. He thought desolately, gotta run, gotta run, gotta run, gotta run. Naruto's expression was the same as Minato's upon learning that Iwa Nin had abducted his missing female student. That was the Hiraishin no Jutsu's initial appearance. Jiraiya wasn't especially interested in seeing what Naruto would reveal. He was, after all, the son of Kushina and Minato. Even as he directed additional chakra to his legs, he shuddered. High above Jiraiya in the sky, Jiraiya skipped, rolled, jumped, and ran anything to distance himself from the mansion of Namikaze. Unfortunately, Naruto flew to keep up with him. He landed on a gazelle like a lion would from the kick to the spine. Jiraiya fell toward the ground. He was thrown farther into the forest. He was running through by a blow to the jaw. A thick tree bucked under the force of his punch. As he slammed into it, a long blade pierced his shoulder to the tree. Jiraiya appeared stunned by the angel who was holding it. With a devil's voice, Naruto said, "Tell me, Jiraiya, tell me what is most precious to you." Jiraiya's head had been smashed hard against the tree's bark, so he just looked up foolishly. With a voice that sounded like Mikai's, Naruto droning, "Will you allow me the pleasure of taking it away? You are my most valuable possession, Naruto." I had to. Jiraiya attempted to respond. "You lie. If I was precious to you, you would have defended me, taken me in, clothed me, fed me. You would have held me when I was lonely," Naruto grumbled bitterly. Jiraiya cast a shamed glance down. He was aware that no justification, not even one as valid as Akatsuki's, would be acceptable. Family was the top priority, right? Apparently, incorrect. Without showing any emotion, Naruto declared, "I hate you, Jiraiya, with all my being, with every inch of my soul, I hate you. I never want to see you again." Naruto then took off for the sky and flew back to his home. No, he had to contend with another traitor in addition to his godparent. Alongside the Hokage, he used his crystal ball to keep a close eye on things. A pierced shoulder, a bruised head, a sore spine, and minor spine damage. It was, in fact, a little underdone. His words, however, were the most powerful. He was aware that Jiraiya was destroyed by the words because of the resentment Naruto had shown him. Jiraiya was no longer a man. He sighed as he remembered the justification. It was a valid one, but it wasn't sufficient to leave family behind. He should have done so many things, as should so many others. However, like himself, he was aware that Jiraiya would not give up. He owed Naruto too much, and he owed Minato too much. Alongside Naruto, ready to punish Tsunade, Naruto landed in his courtyard. He knew what he should do to the woman. He wouldn't even consider them friends or family. Even if they were able to win his heart, it would never be as a relative, never a family member, but perhaps a friend or teammate. Never. With his wing curled protectively around his form, Naruto had stalked towards Tsunade after walking through the mansion. He gave careful consideration to the punishment that would be meted out to Tsunade. He gave a gloomy grin. I just thought of the thing. Everyone was moved by his sly smile, even Sakura, who had just woken up. Tsunade, for your abandonment of your former godson and your disregard to his care, you will suffer. Oh yes, you will, with a technique of mine. His grin widened. Tsunade swallowed with the Akatsuki. Madara was deep in conversation with Pain. Pain realized that a horrible picture was beginning to emerge from the tablets. This has the beginnings of a war that will wage across the universe. Madara-sama, how could one boy, no matter his lineage, no matter his statues as a Jinchuriki, stand up to a god? Asked Pain. The tablets mention some things that don't make sense in the current timeline, like, so the storm of yellow will merge with the squall of red and such will guide the Black Angel. Worry not for the safety of the Chosen One, such will only hasten its descent into anarchy. From what I can gather from the tablets, something bad happened a long time ago. Something caused Zeno to come to fruition, an event so profound, so gigantic, so massive, that it shifted the very course of the universe. I have a feeling that the very fabric of time and space had been tampered with. Based on my understanding of the current Konoha, Namikaze Dono, the Chosen One has already sunk into anarchy. His defensive behavior and treatment of others are enough indicators that it's not making sense. If only I could speak with the Rakudo Sennin himself, I could understand what he was trying to tell me. And it's frustrating on a level one haven't experienced since my brother stole this one girl from me, and it makes my Mangekyo itching for Amaterasu to be released. Maybe they have already happened, Madara-sama, said Pain. No, the first bit says, guide. How can a dead man and woman guide the living? No such thing exists. Madara responded. They were the type of people to care. Period. They wouldn't leave their son behind, not for any reason, so that rules out the possibility of them being alive. In reply, Pain hummed, perhaps this entire mess could be resolved if they could just call forth the Rakudo Sennin. His eyes went wide with astonishment. You fucking numbskull, of course. That method will work. A few minor adjustments will be enough, he thought incredulously. Madara-sama. Yes. Pain smirked slyly and asked, how much do you know about the Shikifuin? After a moment of surprise, Madara burst out laughing. The sound wasn't pretty in the hidden common room with the other Akatsuki. Hidan shuddered. Blue-skinned man. Something wrong, zombie face? Fuck up, fuck face. I just felt a chill, like something bad is going to happen, he responded. Itachi nibbled on a Pocky stick. Chocolate flavor. You're crazy. He rambled. A man wearing a mask and counting money said the bastard that killed his own family. A man with intricate machinery on his left eye replied, says the immortal freak that has an obsession with money. He answered, says the gender-confused pyromaniac. As each member was gradually drawn in, it turned into a shouting match between them all from that point on, aside from Konan and Zetsu. Zetsu questioned, should we join Konan-san? Simple. No food fights, Zetsu, Konan said. Zetsu hung his head dejectedly. In the universe, somewhere, there is darkness everywhere. Above, below, forward, backward, and side to side there was only darkness, broken only occasionally by tiny flecks of light. A massive comet roughly the size of a town pierced the night like a beacon. Dazzling, it looked cruel and evil because of its jagged appearance. It was amethyst and blood in color. There was a tall man in the center of it. His outline could be seen through the gem-like rock that covered him. He had a long object on his back and was seated. One planet, floating in lava and rubble, was streaked past by the comet. Its inner, hotter flame was orange-red, and its fiery trail was a vivid purple-blue. Inside the comet, he waited. While sitting he had patience. He was understanding. His hair was the same color as the gem that surrounded him, making him flawless. His long hair, spiked in orderly disarray, was amethyst with blood-red tips. Its tails hung down his shoulder blades, and a black cloth covered his eyes. He was dressed in a unique kimono-style shirt and pants that matched his boots as though they were one piece. The kimono's right side was black, with red flame patterns running the length of it. There were red and blue flames pointing in all directions on the white left side. Little characters from a long, dead, and ancient language that only the man knew were printed on the white fabric of the top. The flames in the belt were red, blue, and black in a continuous pattern. His pants were identical to his shirt, but they were inverted, and the white fabric appeared to be attached to the top before the belt broke it. 2 red triangle tattoos, the top of which faced his nose, were placed on each of his cheeks. Long red tattoos that covered his entire body were linked to the triangles. An unsightly red burn scar illuminated the area around his right eye from under the cloth covering his eyes. There were no thoughts, no feelings, nothing on his face. His expression was one of anarchy, devouring, consuming, and destroying without consideration, without compassion. When he considered the devastation of his next planet, he didn't even grin. There, he felt the life force that would test him. Cal, Gathur, don't ask for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for you, he thought coldly. His comet crept closer and closer to the planet where the universe would be fought for. Such a battle would split the underworld and tremble the heavens, win or lose. The universe would end that way rather than with a bang. But whimpering rewind. When they got to the training grounds, they saw that Minato had already put in seals to fix many of the craters from his first training session. After defeating the clones, Naruto stumbled over the memories. Naruto simply shook his head when Sarutobi looked at him. To put it mildly, one of the clones' memories is breathtaking. One of the clones had created a kind of dimension pocket by combining genjutsu and basic fuin. It could be positioned over a space, and Naruto could control it, everything from the grass's hue to time itself. Naruto grinned. End of the flashback. For the next 48 hours, you will watch what your betrayal of me has done. You will see its consequences, and you will watch what would have happened had you stayed with me, whispered Naruto. Naruto started his method by flinging a paper tag onto Tsunade's forehead. Kokuden kyo kuahaku jutsu. Kokudo no sono yukai, said Naruto. Technique for time and space. Phantom realm. The world change. Tsunade saw herself floating on nothing in a pitch-black emptiness. Before the emptiness dissolved into Konoha, she had no sense of time, space, or even herself. It sped into Naruto's former apartment, where he was sobbing in his chamber. Her eyes filled with tears alongside Naruto. He watched as Tsunade began to sob and whimper. He was cruel in what he did. Tsunade dislikes considering the repercussions of her behavior. For a very long time, she had been avoiding the repercussions of her past. She did not want to have it thrust into her face. Cruel, indeed. Shizune watched with some resentment and sadness. Anko and Kurenai gave him pitying glances. Sakura watched with some trepidation. Kakashi let out a sad sigh at what had transpired. Get out! Anko and Kurenai shifted. Sakura was taken by the arm by Kakashi, who then got out of dodge. Shizune was the only one left. Nothing will be done physically to Tsunade, but her mind may be sensitive to certain things. After she has seen my life, that is more than what could have been said for me, he replied harshly. Shizune winced. Shizune showed Tsunade their hotel room in the affluent area of Konoha. Jiraiya would need to be picked up en route. Retribution. The word rang in the air, echoing in the deserted house. Then why did he feel so cold on the inside, at Akatsuki Base's super secret? It's simple really, Madara-sama. If we could tweak some of the parts of the Shiki Fuin, then we may be able to summon the Rakudo Sennin. It was a thought that hadn't occurred to me before, Pain said. Such implications, such maddening genius could only be expected from you, Pain, Madara responded. Pain chuckled softly. Madara began to walk. If we could change the contract to the spirit of the Rakudo Sennin, then maybe we could summon him from the nether also. If we could change the sacrifice to something else, like large quantities of chakra, then that could also be worked favorably. Or we could get Hidan or the money whore to do it for us, Madara said without thinking. Pain questioned, did you just call Kakuzu a money whore? Once more, Madara said absently, yes, I did. He bit his lip to contain his laughter. He turned to watch Madara follow suit. Even malevolent geniuses can behave like children at times. That was clear from the hysterical laughter alongside Naruto. Naruto took a seat on the edge of his bed, which was comfortable due to its softness. His shoulder trembled, and his hands were in his face. Naruto experienced sadness, anger, and coldness. He experienced a wide range of emotions, but for some reason, he didn't feel the sense of relief he had anticipated. All he felt was cold. His off day was over. He sighed on the Hiraishin. He was to work. His plan for the Hiraishin had a flaw in that the enemy could use his line of sight to predict his next move. If he didn't capture them after using it for the first time, he would therefore have to use the conventional kunai method. He scowled and remarked, my first idea was shot down by myself, dumb. He collected the kunai he had thrown in his room's drawer. It's time to master a method. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The training ground and house were packed with KBS. Soon, the air was filled with explosions and shouts of techniques. Alongside Hinata, testing her achy stomach, she got to her feet. She grimaced when one of the medic nin was able to heal her internal injuries and restore her strength through a relatively complex ijutsu. She had significantly improved. Despite collapsing later, the medic nin had completed the task. Actually, Hinata felt a little guilty about the entire situation. Recalling what Naruto had done for her, she let out a sigh. None more, she thought savagely. Even if he doesn't want me, I will try to be his friend and stop being a coward. Sadly, she thought, no one should have to go through that alone. Outside, the birds chirping sounded depressing and hollow. They seemed to be able to sense her sadness. Alongside Kurenai and Anko, Kurenai muttered, I've never seen Naruto that angry. Anko remarked, I've never seen Naruto that vulnerable. They were quietly talking about what they had seen while seated in a neighborhood cafe in Konoha's affluent area. I never knew Naruto felt that bitter about what had happened to him. I always thought, Kurenai went on. Anko just gave the window a glare. This was starting to become absurd. Alongside Sakura. Sakura was a complicated girl. That much was clear. She had been mean to Naruto, hit him, and called him derogatory names, but more than anything else, she did it because she hated herself. For once, long ago, she had been in that situation. He had been the one to defend her from a bully who was harassing her. However, she had practically betrayed Naruto when it became the norm to make fun of him. She detested him for doing to him what had been done to her. In addition to being so shallow, doing to him the things he had shielded her from. It was self-centered, superficial, and more than a little foolish. Why didn't she stop then? She thought self-loathingly, I hate myself. I've had a hand in making Naruto what he is today. Rewind. One cheerful, vivacious voice said, don't worry, those bullies are gone now. Curled up on the ground, she looked up from her knees. She noticed a cute boy her age grinning at her. The same joyful voice asked, my name is Uzumaki Naruto, are you okay? Despite her tears, she gave a shy smile. End of the flashback. She felt the memory strike her like a blow. Rewind. She slapped him on the head and screamed, leave me alone, idiot. His eyes seemed to have lost some of their life, but she didn't notice. Mo, Sakura-chan. The grating voice exclaimed. It was less joyful and vivacious than before. End of the flashback. I'm a terrible individual. How could he be so forgiving of me? Was it something he did to get me to leave sooner, or did he mean it? It all sounded so depressing alongside Kakashi. That was too close for comfort. If that was Icha, he had nearly died at the hands of those two fools. As he pretended to read Icha, he told himself, note to self, do not help the Tusani next time you see them. Remember it, Kakashi. His thoughts were elsewhere. Oh sensei, what's going on with Konoha? The following day, Naruto informed the senseis in letters that the training would begin at around 12 o'clock today. It was 11:30 now. He was in the kitchen preparing an enormous amount of food to feed everyone. They would practice until 7 after taking a break for lunch at about 4. To pick up the bunch, he dispatched a cage bunchin. In order to sing in peace, he moved some instruments outside to help him unwind. He created some KBS. When he sensed the group coming, he ordered the KBS to put the instruments back inside. That was exactly what he needed to relax and let go. Looking back at the training ground, he had spruced up a bit. He headed to the front door to retrieve them. Alongside the others, hearing the wild laughter emanating from the mansion turned them off a little. Even though they could enter by walking, they had respectfully waited at the gate. Shoji attempted to say, you don't think, with a terrified expression. Tisk. Shit. Naruto grinned angelically as he opened the door. However, it was not visible in his eyes. He guided them to the practice area. At what they saw, everyone turned pale. Naruto chuckled softly. Welcome to hell, bitches. Shino let out a whine-tattered fairy. Yes, and you're welcome. Shino is so awesome that I might even get him to start listening to rap and opera. Anyway, have fun. At the mansion of Namikaze, Shikamaru concluded that Naruto was a nuisance. No, he was more than that. He would be the god of trouble if there were such a thing. Shikamaru was slammed from a log that swung on the course that the whole group had to go through as retribution for those thoughts. The snake pit slammed into him. There were screams. Alongside Choji. Never before had Choji climbed a tree so quickly. The Junin had chosen to pursue the slowest of the dogs, who somehow appeared vicious enough to frighten them. When one of them tore his shorts and bit him in the ass, he sobbed. He started to say, Naruto, you mother F you, but the dogs were able to seize his shirt and tug. Just before everything turned black, Shoji felt a bite on his tenders, his voice striking the note that most opera singers aspire to hit was the last sound he heard. Alongside Kiba. As a tiger pulled Kiba back into a cave that appeared to be quite small from the outside of the training ground, Kiba screamed. The tiger resembled a tiny house in size. He saw Akamaru turn tail and run away as he screamed as the darkness enveloped him. He started to say, "Akamaru, you traitor, you son of a bit," but was interrupted by the tiger's roar, which pulled him back to his cave. It sounded like trumpets, high-pitched screaming. Alongside Shino. As Shino ran through the course in search of a hiding spot in the hopes of escaping that thing, pants filled the air. When Shino heard the spraying, he intensified his efforts. Shino was being pursued by a mud clone of Naruto behind him. Using a raid insecticide spray, the clone's wild laughter, which resembled the laugh of an anime bad guy, made it obvious that it was insane. Alongside Sasuke. How did he do it? Sasuke looked up in horror. A swarm of leather-clad girls with whips, paddles, chains, and ball gags charged directly at him. "Naruto, you are so dead, you piece of she." The leader of the fangirl army interrupted him with her first tackle. She held something up to his face while grinning. "Oh dear God, not the lube. No." The air was chilled by the sounds of squishing plastic and terrified screams. Alongside Neji. Neji coughed blood, but he was unable to make it because it was too long, too far the light was going out. He made an effort to swim more quickly, but the tiny sharks were closing the distance. He was in a sizable lake that somehow slid into the training ground's rear. In an attempt to swim more quickly and maintain his composure after being bitten in the buttock, he kicked it off. Of course, it doesn't make you cool at all to be able to water walk and then forget about it in a crisis. A piece of Neji's hair was completely bitten off by a tiny shark. "My precious hair." Alongside Lee. Lee appeared astonished by what he was witnessing. Bananas and giant pandas, they began to close in on him. "I will not fail, by the power of youth, I will not fail." The course reverberated with the sound of squishing bananas and roaring pandas. With Tenten. They went on and on, there were just too many. She yelled, "How the hell did he get all these in here?" Adorable cats were let loose on her. She refused to give in to her feminine urges and give them a blue-faced hug. She wouldn't be perceived as a helpless woman. Meow. A particularly adorable cat, the kind that is so adorable that it's positively nauseating, approached her and began pawing her sandal. Guy, who was on the opposite side of the course, was deafened by the cries of cuteness. Yes. Alongside Sakura, Hinata, and Ino. They learned a minor healing technique that would heal minor injuries like scrapes and bruises while standing beside Naruto on the sidelines. They believed Naruto was right to teach them based on the screams, roaring, and squishing of the bananas. Obviously, they would require it alongside Naruto. Naruto laughed as he observed all of this. He had taken a bag of chips from Choji and was munching on them. They referred to it as Kodiros, Motidos, or something similar. Flavored with salsa. After licking his lips, Naruto spun around and headed for the house. Well into 3 p.m., it was Naruto made the decision to let them rest. He approached his house slowly and picked up a huge air horn. The Junin were sitting on the patio that led to the back of the house, talking quietly about training and other things, while trembling a little from the cries of their students. Even Enko was smiling. The entire course was programmed to shut down when the air horn frequency was reached, and it sounded loud and clear. They limped, crawled, inched, and clawed their way to the patio, and their cries of relief and victory were audible. It was a funny scene. Choji was limping, which was a clear sign that he had a crotch injury. He was holding his rear as well. Neji was dragging himself forward by clawing with his hands while Kiba was hopping on one foot. Shino was bent over and appeared to be having trouble walking. Shikamaru's right side appeared to be limp, and he had a huge bruise on his face. His shoulders, arms, and face were covered in bite marks. Lee's suit was fairly well clawed up, and he was drenched in liquid banana juice. Sasuke walked as though there was something wrong with his rear and tenders, and he had dark bruises on his face and neck as if something had been mistreated. Upon closer inspection, the bruises showed hints of black lipstick, purple, and red. Tenten was surrounded by cats that gave her adorable meows. She was agitated and twitching because, of all things, kittens were taking her out. Even though he was about to laugh a little, Naruto kept his face straight. Enko was less reticent. Every genin gave her a scowl. Still, she laughed. "Right. Can anyone tell me why I did that?" "The reason?" Naruto replied. While tending to his injured leg, Kiba was interrupted by Hinata, who unexpectedly slapped the back of his head. "Because you are a son of a bit." However, it was like applying a band-aid to a stump that had once been an arm. Ino was disgusted that she had to heal Choji's behind, but she accepted it because she knew it would hurt him to keep it that way. Sakura and Ino were similarly treating the others. In an attempt to seal the bite wounds, Sakura was tending to Shikamaru. Her reserves were so low that it hardly affected them. "You did that to see where we were as ninja, to see where you would train us, our weaknesses and strengths," Shikamaru replied. "Wrong, I did that to show you the power of fear. That was a complex Fuin-nin genjutsu that altered reality. A personal technique of mine, Kokugan Kyokuhaku Jutsu. Kokudo no Sono Yukai is powerful, of course. Some of your fears are plain ridiculous. I mean, really, bananas, Lee?" Naruto replied. Lee gave a clumsy cough. "I don't like bananas, Naruto-sensei. I had an accident once where I sat," he responded. Shaking his head and closing his eyes, Naruto held up a hand and said, "I don't want to know what accident you could get into with a banana. I don't want to know." The implications had made everyone a little queasy. Anyway, this showed me that you do not take being a ninja seriously, as a true shinobi's fear would be to see her comrades die, or even enemy shinobi attacking their village. "I will rectify this," said Naruto. That caused a collective tingle among the genin. It sounded dreadfully similar to a pledge. "Well, on to lunch. My clones will bring out some food. You can eat out here," Naruto said with a smile and a clap of his hands. A dozen or so materialized when Naruto snapped his fingers. Naruto grinned, since he had finally succeeded in replacing the hand seals. If he could only make that one method work now. Just in time, he thought. He began to recall his Hiraishin training as the clones entered the house. It was simple, almost too simple. The fact that no one could see how it was done escaped his notice. It was nearly offensive. He was still tinkering with it, trying to figure out where, if at all, he could make it better, but he could do it now. He focused on an attack he discovered in the vault while he had a group of people working on that. Rasengan. He grinned alongside Jiraiya. As he submerged himself in the hot springs, Jiraiya let out a sigh. His body ached, so he refrained from peeking at the women's side of the hot springs. Primarily his heart flash. "I hate you," end of flash. This is not good. He should be aware of the group pursuing him. If I could only make him realize that what I was doing was for him. That doesn't justify what I did, of course, but Jiraiya thought. Sigh. Nothing is ever easy. For the first time in her life, Jiraiya was disgusted by the women's laughter and giggling on the other side of the wall that separated their bathing areas. "Goddamn student of mine, goddamn Akatsuki, goddamn Jude Law," he replied. Tenzo, a nearby shinobi, was lounging in the pool next to Jiraiya. "What on earth is Jude Law?" alongside Tsunade. She shook and picked up the saucer of the liquid she had been using to block out the memories of what she had witnessed for the past few years. The most recent ones weren't working. Flash. A little blonde boy held out money for an apple, saying, "Please, sir, I'm hungry, can I have an apple?" A sneering short, bald, and fat man said, "I don't serve your kind." Naruto was hurt by the hurt expression on her face as the man left to speak with other patrons. That simply hurt. There was no metaphor for it. Flash. Today, class, we will be learning about chakra, the energy nin utilized to execute nin, gen and even taijutsu, an unidentified instructor stated. There was a lot of discussion about the topic in class. Finally, something interesting. "I will write it on the blackboard, and then I must go gather a paper test. On it you will write down what you have read and learned from the board," he went on. Naruto's features were marred by a frown of frustration. He was angry, agitated, and frustrated with this teacher because he had taken the extra effort to write it down on the board without saying it aloud. Naruto was illiterate at the time. He was 10. Flash. In a quiet apartment, a grieving child's voice said, "Mother, father, where are you? Why did you leave me here? Why?" His parents and his heritage were the targets of insults from the bullies who had harassed him today. "Where are you? You're where? You're where?" It reverberated in his bedroom, accompanied by the sound of tears on the floor. End of flash. The ones that showed her what it might have been like were the ones that caused her the greatest pain. Flash. A little child exclaimed, "Hey Tsunade Obasama, can we go to the park today?" as he smiled up at a blonde queen. She gave a kind response, "Of course, Naru-chan." After pouting at the moniker, Naruto took her hand and pulled her laughing to the park. He put his arms around her neck and grinned at Tsunade, who had lifted him up and held him in her arms. She gave his hair a shake. Flash. It was nighttime, and Tsunade was reading Naruto a bedtime story about the shinobi legend Rakudo Sennin. And with his Keke Genkai, the Rakudo Sennin sealed the spirit of the Jubi inside of him, and then he used a technique of his bloodline limit to encase the body of the fallen demon in stone, and cast it to the sky, where it became the moon. "Whoa!" exclaimed Naruto, raising his hands in the air and nearly slamming the book out of her grasp. He exclaimed, "I want to be just like him, once more." She gave him a kind smile. She kissed him on the forehead and tucked him in, saying, "Good night, Naru-chan." "I love you, Grandma." His voice was one of comfort and love. "I love you too, Naru-chan," she said, "I love you too." End of Flash. The saucer broke on the floor after slipping out of her hands. She was helped by Shizune, who cleared away the shards of ceramic and the spoiled liquid. Whispering, "What have I done?" Tsunade asked now. It could never be that way, never, she knew. All Shizune could do was look at her with despair. Alongside Naruto. Pop Naruto smiled. The Rasengan training was simple in the beginning. The scroll's instructions were incredibly clear and detailed. He proceeded to the next phase of the training. After picking up a rubber ball, his action was imitated by the 50. With his book dropped into the ashtray Asuma had brought for his cigarettes, Kakashi gazed at Naruto. Kakashi didn't care that it quickly caught fire. In a few minutes, he had finished the first step. With a quiet deadpan, Kakashi said, "What frightening potential." Guy gave a silent nod silently, yes, using the genin. The phrase, "a Fuin Nin Genjutsu technique hybrid man that is some serious she," was interrupted once more by Hinata's slap. Akamaru, his partner, seemed amused by his yelp. In fact, it made everyone laugh. Sakura and Ino were pleased to see Hinata displaying her feminine superiority and smiled at her. Troublesome, Choji was busy snatching food scraps from everyone with skill. Nobody noticed until they went to bite into the sandwich, which already had a bite mark on it, because Choji was so delicious. Kiba shouted, "Chouji, that's my sandwich." Choji continued to chew. Alongside Naruto. Naruto paused to consider the Rasengan. He should really work on his bending because he had neglected it in favor of his other techniques and Kenjutsu. He entered the sea learning by the patio and left his clones to learn the rest of the Rasengan. He stood wearing tight-fitting black leather pants and black combat boots, shrugging off his signature coat and shoulder pads before removing the belt that once held it to his body. His fingers were crossed in front of his chest. He declared, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." A lone KB appeared before him. Since the clone was designed with training in mind, it was aware of what was going on by default. The fact that they would be practicing firebending was obvious to him. Both of them slid into a solid stance that Kyuubi had taught him. With his right foot back behind him and his left foot forward, the real Naruto stood with his torso angled so that his left side faced the clone. His left arm was in a fist, pointing directly at the clone right next to his eyes, palm out. His right arm was bent and open, palm out. The clone was sideways in a horse stance. Its right side was oriented toward Naruto. Its right hand was out, its thumb and pointer thumb were still pointed, and its pinky, ring, and index fingers were curled into a fist at his hip. As he kicked out, Naruto sent a sweeping spray of conflagration. The original's fire was met by the clone's own flame in a blazing burst of light and heat. They met. The clone caught the flame with both hands, bending and rotating his torso in a circle to catch the momentum and send it back to the original, who then jumped up and kicked out with both feet, sending a larger fireball that consumed the redirected fireball. Naruto used the karate technique, twisting his entire body to increase the speed and strength of the punch. A wave of heat and fire was directed towards Naruto as the clone leapt to the side while performing a perfect sweep attack with his body parallel to the ground. Naruto leapt to his feet and delivered 3 punches to the air. 3 fireballs of moderate size were on their way to the clone. After avoiding 2, the clone scattered the final one. Naruto then clapped his hands together in a kind of cone before jerking them apart as the clone sent him a huge, twisting conflagration of flaming magma. His actions caused the magma to split before it struck him, then fall to the ground and strike the trees nearby, hissing as it did so. The group just gazed in wonder at him. Only Naruto was a whisper. The others all said, "Only Naruto." 2 more clones were called forth by Naruto, and all of the Narutos assumed ready positions that stood for fire, water, air, and earth. Naruto moved into the water. Now the battle started. With Madara and Pain. "What? You heard correctly, Yugito-san. We do not wish to kill you, but we will remove the stigma of the Nibi from you. This offer is offered to you as well, Kurabi-san." The 2 Jinchuriki in chains were in awe. "You will of course have to help the organization in its quest to help Naruto Dono," Pain concluded. Kurabi was interrupted by the overwhelming pressure of Madara's intent to commit massacre. "I won't serve some weakling who doesn't know the meaning of pain and battle." Itachi's MI was dwarfed by his. He rolled his eyes at the stupidity of saying, "You are replaceable and disposable." "Do not doubt him, Foolish little Jinchuriki, while your help would be helpful. The words froze the room where a hideous statue with 9 hands and 9 eyes stood. The expression on its lips was one of the greatest agony and damnation. As Kurabi and Yugito exchanged glances, Kurabi's eyes darkened and Yugito's blue eyes appeared to sparkle. Kurabi remarked, "So be it, we'll serve Naruto-sama." Madara reminded him, "That's Naruto Dono." The rarest urge to stick his tongue out at Madara came to Kurabi. Yugito said to herself, "Stupid oxhead, at this rate, the fool will get her killed." Pain. Gather your men and start the new extraction process. I must investigate a new ruin that was found in Tatsu no Kuni that may hold more tablets from the Rakudo Senin. Do not fail me or Naruto Dono. Madara said. Pain's response was, "Indeed." Figures flickered, unfocused, and shimmered onto the monstrous statue's outstretched hands. Out of the 2 Jinchuriki, 2 tethers flowed. One earthen brown-green, the other purple-black.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.